Chapter 443. After exchanging the Manjikyu Sharingan for Jishui, Hyojin told Jishui and Itachi about his speculation. After listening to Hyojin's analysis, Itachi asked with some doubt, if Senpai's guess is correct, then it means that Naruto-sama not only knows about the actions of the Akatsuki, but also the approximate time of the action. But the Akatsuki is so secretive, how did Naruto-sama know so much about it? Jishui said, could it be that Naruto-sama also has a spy in the Akatsuki? The reason why she used the word also is because Jishui guessed that Shinichi has most likely joined Hyojin's side and became Hyojin's eyes and ears in the Akatsuki. Hyojin shook his head. The Akatsuki just suffered a loss and even lost their base in the Rain Village. Now is the time to be careful, so it shouldn't be so easy to infiltrate them. Even Shinichi, who has long gained the trust of Obsidian, didn't have the opportunity to pass a message to Hyojin during this period of time. Logically speaking, it is unlikely that the 3 generations would be able to successfully plant a spy in the Akatsuki during this sensitive period. After pondering for a while, Itachi analyzed, this means that Naruto-sama has other sources of information. Hyojin gently nodded. I suspect that the Akatsuki's operation against the village this time may have a partner, and the information may have been leaked from this partner. If the Akatsuki didn't leak the information themselves, then there is only one possibility, and that is that the partner of the Akatsuki organization leaked the information. In the shinobi world, the only organization that is qualified to cooperate with the Akatsuki organization is the Shinobi Village, and other small traitorous organizations are simply not qualified to cooperate with the Akatsuki organization. Jishui asked, Senpai, what should we do? Hyojin took out the plan that Itachi gave him before and said, I will now give you 2 a task. Follow the exploration route in this plan and carefully explore it. Shursui took a look at the proposal and was stunned. He also has an impression of this plan. It is the plan that Itachi developed according to the requirements of Hyojin when he was protecting him. However, the practice of pupil power, ninjutsu, taijutsu, ninja tools, and other aspects were all erased, leaving only the part about exploring the ruins of Uchiha during the Warring States period. Itachi was somewhat surprised and asked, Senior, you can't be serious, right? Hyojin explained slowly, in an ancient book, I learned that there is a divine artifact in the shinobi world called Sword of 10 Fists. This artifact is also known as the Sword of Sealing. It can seal the enemy into a genjutsu world, and according to the ancient book, this divine artifact is related to your Uchiha clan, and the clues are likely to be hidden in the ruins of your Uchiha clan. Itachi suddenly understood. No wonder you mentioned Sword of 10 Fists and Yagami Mirror to me several times. Hyojin then said, I need this Sword of 10 Fists to deal with the strong enemy in the Akatsuki organization who mastered spacetime ninjutsu, and no one is more suitable than the 2 of you to explore the ruins of Uchiha clan. Jishui was a little worried. What about the village? If we can't find the Sword of 10 Fists, we will always be in a passive position. Even if we can stop the enemy this time, we can't stop the next one. So believe in 3 generations. He is Naruto. He can protect the village. Compared to spending his energy on weakening the enemy, Hyojin prefers to focus on improving himself, because he has both a direction and a plan. As long as he is given enough time, he can smoothly stand on the top of the shinobi world and look down on all his enemies with a smile. Therefore, this is a competition between Kekkei Net and Jubi's Jinchuriki. If Hyojin achieves Kekkei Net first, then all the problems are no longer a problem. But if the Akatsuki organization gathers all the 9-tailed beasts and achieves Jubi's Jinchuriki first and releases Kagaya, then Hyojin will only be slightly stronger cannon fodder. Therefore, except for the matter of Jubi's Jinchuriki, Hyojin doesn't need to waste energy on every operation of the Akatsuki organization. At this time, a ninja crow flew in and landed on Hyojin's shoulder. Taking off the small scroll tied to the ninja crow's leg, Hyojin opened it and immediately said to Jishui and Itachi, "Yagura has secretly arrived at the village." What? Both Jishui and Itachi were taken aback. In fact, Suijin was also a little surprised. Although it has been a total of 2 months, the current situation is different from the past. If the village Kage wants to leave the village, in addition to making arrangements in the village, selecting capable guards, exploring hidden routes, and so on, it takes time. Therefore, Yagura, as the Mizukage, being able to arrive in Konoha within 2 months after receiving the news is already very efficient. Itachi sighed. Naruto-sama's operation this time is really secretive. Our Uchiha clan didn't receive any news at all. Jishui seemed to have the same feeling and nodded. Yes, there was no news at all. Looking at the shocked faces of the two, Hyojin secretly cursed. Is it really appropriate for the two of you to be so surprised? It is normal for the village to be able to hide from the eyes and ears of the Uchiha clan. As a noble shinobi who didn't even notice the night of the extermination of the clan, Hyojin doesn't care about the intelligence-gathering ability of the Uchiha clan. Waving his hand, Hyojin said, "Well, Yagura has secretly arrived at the village, which means that the plan of the 3 generations is going smoothly. You two don't need to worry about the affairs of the village. The most important task for the two of you now is to find the sword of Jukken for me." "We understand." Jishui and Itachi heard this and nodded solemnly. After leaving the Uchiha clan, Kuroto returned home and took out the storage scroll containing the Chimera technique as well as a living Onigiri sprout from the ninja bag he carried with him. Previously, cultivating the 2 wind release clones had used up the last batch of precious herbs in Hyojin's storage. Now, he didn't even have the money to concoct the nutrient solution, so he had to sell the Ghost Sprout technique and the Ghost Sprout technique as soon as possible in exchange for some money. As for the target, he had already chosen it outside of the Mai village, in a dense forest. A figure wearing a black cloak with golden edges and a mask with a wind pattern slowly walked through the dense forest, step by step into the depths of the forest. Swish! At this time, a root ninja suddenly jumped out from the bushes and launched an attack. However, before the short knife in the root ninja's hand could touch the black cloak with golden edges, the root ninja's body was entangled by black iron sand and imprisoned on the spot. "Tell Danzo that I want to make a deal with him." Chapter 444. You are a member of Amatsukami? Being bound tighter and tighter by the flowing black iron sand, the root ninja could no longer breathe. That's right. The one with the wind mask was none other than Hyojin, the one who controlled the wind clone A-class. The reason he came here was to trade for the Chimera technique, and also to get used to the wind clone A-class. Although this type A wind release clone body seems to be tailor-made for Suijin's soul body, it's like custom-made new clothes. After all, it still needs to be worn a lot. After all, the compatibility between a soul body and a physical body involved too many factors. It was not something that could be judged by feeling alone. No matter how good the wind clone A-class was, Hyojin would not skip the process of getting used to it. The root ninja's face turned red as he asked, How did you know that the root's base is here?" Hyojin waved his hand and removed the sand that bound the root ninja. He said lightly, "I have no interest in talking nonsense with you. Lead the way, I want to see Danzo." After a while of retching, the root ninja said, "Danzo-sama is not here." "Is that so?" Hyojin snorted and said coldly, "Forget it. It's not a problem for me to kill my way in any way." The root ninja's face stiffened. "Please wait a moment, I will inform him for you." Inside the root space, Orochimaru, who was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed over his chest, said in a hoarse voice, "Tisk, I don't know why, you obviously did so many things, but the old man still turned a blind eye to you. He obviously removed your roots, but he still let you keep so many people." I don't know why, you obviously did so many things, but the old man still turned a blind eye to you. Orochimaru, watch your tone. Danzo slammed his staff on the ground, and a powerful chakra burst out from his body. Feeling the powerful chakra, Orochimaru narrowed his eyes. Danzo was the same age as the 3 generations, and his body was already declining. Moreover, Danzo's strength was a notch lower than the 3 generations. Therefore, he should not possess such a powerful chakra due to his old age. Thinking of a possibility, Orochimaru's expression turned serious. You've succeeded? Danzo didn't deny it and said in a low voice, this old man has already subdued the 1st generation's cells. Just as I thought. Orochimaru looked at Danzo with a hint of respect in his eyes. Although he was often considered crazy, in fact, Orochimaru was more cautious than any other researcher. This was because his ultimate goal was eternal life. Because of this, any experiment that might endanger his life was useless to Orochimaru. Therefore, when faced with the great risk of transplanting the 1st generation's cells, he chose to give up. When faced with the great risk of practicing immortal arts, he chose to give up. When faced with the unpredictable hidden danger of the Chimera technique, he still chose to give up. But just like Tenseigan, Orochimaru has a little bit of admiration for pioneers like Hirako and Danzo who are willing to bet their lives on the line, but of course it's just a little bit. Danzo said in a serious tone, you have been in the Akatsuki, and you are old acquaintances with Hirako. I guess you must have the Chimera technique. Tell me, what do you want? As long as you hand over the Chimera technique, I can satisfy you. Orochimaru smiled and was about to speak. Swish, suddenly, a root ninja landed beside Danzo and whispered a few words into Danzo's ear. After listening, Danzo frowned and said, invite him in. Yes. The root ninja replied respectfully and immediately used the body flicker technique and disappeared from the room. At this time, Orochimaru asked, who is it? Danzo said, take a guess. To be able to make you temporarily cancel the Chimera technique, the identity of the other party must be extraordinary. After a pause, Orochimaru said with a smile, could it be someone from Akatsuki? Danzo shook his head. Orochimaru frowned and said, Amatsuki? Danzo didn't answer and just looked at the entrance. After a while, a figure wearing a black cloak and a mask with a gale pattern came in. Danzo and Orochimaru immediately looked at Hyojin from head to toe. At this time, Hyojin also noticed Orochimaru and thought to himself, hey, why is he here? Danzo asked, who are you? Hyojin said in a cold tone, Amatsuki Kaze Chimera. Kaze Chimera? Danzo and Orochimaru chewed on this name at the same time. They know that every member of Amatsuki has a code name, and this code name often represents the main chakra attribute of the member. For example, Tenseigan is a Kekkai Genkai ninja who is proficient in ice release, and Homasubi is a member of the Uchiha clan who is proficient in fire release. Since the person in front of them has the code name Kaze Chimera, it undoubtedly means that his main chakra attribute is wind. In other words, he is the member of Amatsuki who possesses magnetic release Kekkai Genkai. Danzo then said, how can you prove that you are a member of Amatsuki and not an imposter? Humph. Accompanied by Hyojin's cold snort, a cloud of iron sand swept towards Danzo. Danzo's figure flashed and avoided the iron sand by a hair's breadth and said, all right, what do you want from this old man? In the shinobi world, there are only a few people who have mastered magnetic release Kekkai Genkai, so after seeing Hyojin using magnetic release with his own eyes, Danzo no longer had any doubt. Putting away the iron sand, Hyojin said, 3 generations is already too old, and he doesn't have the courage to cooperate with Amatsuki, so we need a partner with courage and ambition, and you are one of the partners we have chosen. In order to show our sincerity, we can sell you the Chimera technique, and if you want, we can even sell you a living ghost sprout, as long as you can pay the price. Danzo's expression changed. How come you have the Chimera technique? Just as he proposed the Chimera technique to Orochimaru, Amatsuki inexplicably came knocking on his door. This made him vigilant. Hyojin said bluntly, "We have captured Akatsuki's Shino and obtained the Chimera technique." After weighing the pros and cons, Danzo asked, "What price do I have to pay to obtain the Chimera technique and a living ghost sprout?" Hyojin stretched out his palm and said, 50 million. Danzo frowned. So cheap? After hearing Hyojin's price, Danzo subconsciously began to doubt whether the Chimera technique in Hyojin's hands was real or not. Chapter 445. Cheap? Looking at Danzo's face full of suspicion, Hyojin suddenly felt that his understanding of money and Danzo's understanding seemed to be on a completely different channel. 50 million is obviously a huge amount of money. After secretly exclaiming in his heart, he immediately became angry. Danzo, that damn old bastard, how much of the village people's blood and sweat has he taken from them? How can he be so arrogant? Hyojin, who felt that he was being despised, indeed had a reason to be angry. The price of 50 million was by no means a spur-of-the-moment idea, but the result of careful consideration. It must be known that Tsunade was forced to accept a disciple due to the debt problem, and as for the later 70 million, that was added by Hyojin himself in order to let you stay more comfortable by Tsunade's side. In other words, the huge amount of 50 million is almost equivalent to the identity of a Sannin disciple. Not only can a Mai ninja get the protection of one of the Sannin, Tsunade, but also can learn from Tsunade such as In Seal, monstrous strength, and so on. If Tsunade succeeds the throne of Naruto, this Mai ninja will even be qualified to be the next Naruto. Therefore, 50 million is a huge amount of money that can change a person's identity, status, and even fate. If calculated according to the bounty, as one of the 12 guardian shinobi of the Land of Fire, the bounty of Asuma's head was only 35 million. It must be known that at that time, Asuma was already one of the few elite jonin in Mai, and there were only a few who were stronger than him in the village, and he didn't fall behind when competing with the Akatsuki organization's Ghost Mermaid and Flying Dan. If it wasn't for the lack of information, he wouldn't have died so easily. But this huge amount of money of 1.5 times the value of Asuma, and Danzo said, so cheap, so casually, which made Hyojin so angry that he almost vomited blood. Dong dong. At this time, Danzo heavily knocked on the staff in his hand, and said in a deep voice, "As long as the Chimera technique in your hands is real, money is not a problem." If it wasn't to maintain the mysterious feeling of Amatsukami, Hyojin really wanted to change his mind on the spot and give a new price. But the price has already been given. If he reneged now, it would make Danzo look down on Amatsukami. So, Hyojin suppressed the anger in his heart and smiled. "Whether it is real or fake, you will know when you see it." After saying that, Hyojin took out the storage scroll containing the Chimera technique and the ghost sprout from the storage bag on his waist, and threw it to Danzo. After catching the storage scroll, Danzo, who was used to being depressed, showed a rare expression of excitement. He quickly threw the staff in his hand to the side and opened the storage scroll with both hands. Seems like this old man has been eyeing the Chimera technique for a long time. Looking at the excited expression on Danzo's face, Hyojin suddenly realized that he had made a mistake. From Hyojin's point of view, the Chimera technique did indeed have the ability to devour the bloodline limit, but the hidden danger was also very obvious. Although Danzo was not a pure researcher, he had been immersed in this field for a long time, so there was no reason that he couldn't see this point. So when he evaluated the Chimera technique, Hyojin also took these negative factors into consideration. However, it turned out that Hyojin had completely underestimated Danzo's desire for the Chimera technique. Or more accurately, Hyojin had completely underestimated Danzo's ambition. After carefully examining the Chimera technique, and then looking at the living ghost sprout, Danzo suppressed his joy and asked Orochimaru, "Is this chimera technique real?" Orochimaru took the chimera technique, provided by Hyojin from Danzo's hand. After carefully examining it, he found that this chimera technique was more advanced than the chimera technique he got from Hirako before he defected from the Akatsuki. It was obviously an improved version of the chimera technique, so he became interested and carefully examined it while nodding. "Yes, it's indeed real." After getting a positive answer from Orochimaru, Danzo was immediately overjoyed. He no longer cared about the dignity of the root leader, and held the living ghost sprout as if it was a treasure. At this time, Hyojin had quietly activated his Byakugan. In the vision of the Byakugan, he could clearly see that there were two sources of chakra in Danzo's body that had not completely fused. This meant that Danzo had transplanted the first-generation cells, but because he was not an Uchiha, he could not completely fuse the Yin release chakra and Yang release chakra into one. TSK, this is really, for a moment, Hyojin couldn't think of a word to describe Danzo. Right now, Danzo's body is like half ice and half fire, and the ice and fire just reached a weak balance, which allowed him to survive by a fluke. If he was in a battle and overused one side's chakra, the balance would be broken. Then, even without the enemy, his own body would be able to take his life. Thinking of this, Hyojin reminded, "Don't underestimate this ghost sprout. Its ability to devour flesh is beyond imagination. Our organization has conducted internal research on it, and found that it is very difficult to control. Therefore, this ghost sprout has a very high risk, and you must be fully prepared before using it." Danzo didn't expect Hyojin to say such words, and looked at Hyojin with surprise. Orochimaru also looked at Hyojin and thought, "Amatsukami showed such kindness to Danzo. Do they really want to support Danzo to ascend to the position of Naruto?" Hyojin told the truth, of course, not for Danzo's benefit, but he still needed Danzo to test the hidden danger of the ghost sprout. If Danzo died inexplicably after transplanting the ghost sprout, wouldn't it be a waste of Hyojin's efforts? But to Hyojin's surprise, Danzo waved his hand and laughed. "A mere ghost sprout can't do anything to this old man." Hyojin immediately cursed. "Damn, if I knew he didn't care about the hidden danger of the ghost sprout, I wouldn't have offered such a conservative price. What a loss." Clap clap. Danzo lightly clapped his hands, and a moment later, a root ninja landed beside him. Danzo ordered, "Prepare the money." The root ninja quickly responded, then quickly took a box and opened it in front of Hyojin, revealing a neatly stacked stack of money. Danzo smiled and said to Hyojin, "Here is 50 million, this old man will remember the favor of Amatsukami." Chapter 446. Carrying a box of money, Hyojin slowly left the root base. For someone with Byakugan, it was easy for him to observe the progress of Danzo's ghost sprout transplant. There was no need to rush, so he decisively left the root base. Not long after he left the forest, Hyojin suddenly stopped, turned around and said, "Come out." At this time, a figure walked out from behind a big tree and said with a mocking face, as expected of a member of Amatsukami, "You sure are sharp. Orochimaru, why are you following me?" Hyojin asked coldly. Orochimaru leaned against a big tree with his arms crossed and asked, "I'm curious, why did Amatsukami choose Danzo? What are you planning to use him for?" Hyojin curled his lips and said, "I thought you no longer care about my—" Orochi laughed and said, "I'm just a little curious. You want to know?" After a cold snort, Hyojin said, "Beat me and I'll tell you." To be honest, Hyojin really wanted to use the Type A Wind Release clone body to fight with a master like Orochimaru and test the strength of the Type A Wind Release clone body. Seeing that Hyojin was planning to fight, Orochimaru's eyes narrowed. He was indeed curious about why Amatsukami suddenly contacted Danzo, but he remembered that he had other things to do next, so he said, "Forget it, it's just a little curiosity. There's no need to be enemies with Amatsukami. Swoosh, as soon as he finished speaking, Orochimaru disappeared in front of Hyojin with a blink technique. Hyojin was startled and asked, why did he leave so quickly? Orochimaru has never been a guy who easily admits defeat, and this time he withdrew so decisively, which made Kuroto faintly feel that Orochimaru seems to have something else to do, so he didn't want to entangle with him anymore. After returning home, Kuroto counted the banknotes he had just earned. Dong dong dong, suddenly, a series of hurried knocks came from outside the courtyard. Hyojin, who had already changed back to his escape body, opened the courtyard door and saw Ziyuan standing at the door with a pout. Ase stood behind her and smiled at Hyojin. Hyojin touched Ziyuan's head and asked, why do you look unhappy? Who made you angry? Ziyuan quickly said, brother, I have a secret to tell you. Hyojin smiled and immediately led Ziyuan and Ase into the house. During this period of time, because he was busy with all kinds of things, Hyojin had to entrust Ziyuan to Bell. Fortunately, Bell's parents liked Ziyuan very much, and the 3 generations also gave Ziyuan a lot of preferential treatment in the village because of her identity as a witch of the country of demons. Therefore, Ziyuan lived very comfortably during her time in Mai. After entering the house, Ziyuan looked around sneakily. After confirming that there was no one, she leaned over and whispered in Hyojin's ear, brother, I saw the death prophecy. Hyojin, who did not pay much attention at first, frowned slightly. Whose death prophecy? Ziyuan said, it's the grandma who sells octopus balls. Ase, who was at the side, quickly explained, sir, it's the owner of Tanagawa Restaurant on Ancient Spring Street. A commoner. After thinking to himself, Hyojin asked, how did the grandma die in the prophecy? Ziyuan recalled for a while and pouted. I think she was killed by the roof. No, I think she was killed by the wooden door. Anyway, the scene in the death prophecy was a mess. I can't remember how the grandma died. Hyojin said, be good, Ziyuan. Try to recall. What else did you see in the death prophecy? Ziyuan supported her chin and recalled seriously again. She said slowly, the death prophecy happened at night. I only saw a huge black shadow sweeping around the village, making the village a mess. Think about it carefully. Are there any other details? By the way, the Ilu ramen shop was also destroyed. As she said that, Ziyuan covered her chest and muttered to herself, oh no, I still have a coupon that I haven't used. The Ilu ramen shop was destroyed? The Ilu ramen shop was located in the center of the village. If even the Ilu ramen shop was affected, it meant that the attack area almost covered the entire village. Who else did you tell about these things? Ziyuan shook her head. Sister Ling hasn't been home for a few days. I didn't have a chance to tell her. Ase said, Master Kuroto, Master Ziyuan didn't tell anyone about the death prophecy other than you and me. As the guard of the Miko of the demon country, Ase knew better than anyone else about the Miko's death prophecy ability. For the Miko herself, it was not a good thing because once this ability was exposed, the public would naturally reject and dislike the Miko. Therefore, she had been trying her best to prevent Ziyuan from publicizing the death prophecy she had recently seen. Hyojin nodded and said, very good. Don't tell anyone about this. Ziyuan asked in a low voice, brother, don't you need to inform Naruto-sama? I saw that a lot of people were injured in the death prophecy. Hyojin rubbed Ziyuan's head and said, I will personally handle the matter of informing Naruto-sama. You don't have to worry about it. Hyojin knows very well that the 3 generations have been planning this for a long time, so when the village was attacked, the 3 generations must have taken precautions. Even if he told the 3 generations about the death prophecy, at this time, it is unlikely to reduce the village's losses. After comforting Ziyuan, Hyojin pulled Ase aside and said, have you participated in the village's evacuation drill? Ase nodded and said, yes. Hyojin lowered his voice and said, Once there is a riot, you don't need to care about anything else, just take Zun to take refuge, understand? Yes. Ase nodded very solemnly. After sending away Zun and Ase, Hyojin sat cross-legged in the room and thought to himself, what is that huge shadow? In the ruins of Uchiha during the Warring States period, Jishui stroked the mural on the wall and shouted, Itachi, come here and look at the person on this mural. Itachi, who was not far away, came over and saw that the mural in front of Jishui depicted a person of the Uchiha clan who seemed to be using the Susanoo-eye technique. What was striking was that the Susanoo seemed to be carrying a huge gourd in its right hand. Itachi wondered, how can there be such a big gourd? Jishui said while stroking the mural, it's strange. The color of the gourd on the mural is completely different from the color of the Susanoo. It doesn't seem to be the ability of the Susanoo. Chapter 447. Although the murals in the ruins are old, the colors on them are still gorgeous, so it is very clear that the color of the Susanoo is different from the color of the gourd. The Susanoo was slightly greenish-blue, while the gourd in its hand was conspicuously red. The contrast was so great that it was hard not to notice it. As the owner of the Manjikyu Sharingan, Jishui and Itachi are both Uchiha clansmen who can open their own Susanoo. Therefore, the two of them are not unfamiliar with Susanoo. They know that Susanoo is a Manjikyu Sharingan technique, and it is actually the product of the combination of the user's pupil power and chakra. The color projected corresponds to the nature of the user's chakra, so in theory, each Susanoo should have a single color, because everyone's chakra nature is the same. If there are multiple colors on a Susanoo, then there is only one reasonable explanation, and that is, there are other chakras that do not belong to the owner of the Susanoo that have entered the Susanoo. Itachi looked along the murals on the wall and had a general understanding of the story described in the murals. The protagonist of the murals is a patriarch of the Uchiha clan during the Warring States period. He not only awakened the Manjikyu Sharingan and opened the Susanoo, but also obtained a very powerful weapon, which is the red gourd in the hand of the Susanoo. This patriarch, with his Manjikyu Sharingan and that powerful weapon, swept the shinobi world at that time, and pushed the Uchiha clan to the peak of its power at that time. Itachi wondered. The gourd in his hand, is it the jukin? Hearing Itachi's whisper, Jishui said, shouldn't the jukin be a sword? Itachi said his speculation. As a sword of sealing, the appearance of the jukin may be different from the ordinary sword. Jishui nodded. Yes, this is indeed a clue. After reaching a consensus, the two of them split up to search for clues in the ruins. However, after searching for a long time, they did not find any clues related to the gourd in the mural. When they met again, Jishui said, there is no record of this gourd in the tribe. Could it be that this gourd was buried together with the ancestor Uchiha on the mural? Itachi also thought of this possibility. If the gourd is really so powerful that it allowed the Uchiha ancestor to sweep the entire shinobi world, then Konoha clan shouldn't have no records of it. The only possibility is that the gourd was buried with the Uchiha ancestor, and in order to prevent outsiders from disturbing the tomb of the Uchiha ancestor, the Konoha clan destroyed all the information about the gourd, leaving only vague legends and murals of the Uchiha ancestor. Spreading out the map in his hand, Itachi drew a few circles on the map based on his memory and said, I have read the ancient books of the family. These locations are the tombs of our ancestors of Uchiha. After the establishment of the Mai clan, the dead Mai ninjas were buried in the cemetery near the monument, and the Uchiha clan is no exception. Therefore, the cemetery of Uchiha during the Warring States period has long been abandoned, and most of them are unattended. After hesitating for a moment, Jishui said, let's go and have a look. Although disturbing the tomb of the ancestor is a very rude thing to do, but in contrast, protecting the village and protecting the family is more important. If the legendary Jukan is really in the tomb of an ancestor of Uchiha, then Jishui would rather disturb the peace of the ancestor and obtain the artifact, Jukan, that can protect the village and the family. Itachi did not hesitate and said, "Brother Jishui, rest assured, the ancestors of the family will not blame us." In a practice field of the Mai clan, Kurenai, who completed the training task, slowly walked to the side of the practice field, picked up a towel to wipe the sweat, and held a water bottle to replenish the water. Although she has become a member of the Umbu with heavy tasks, Kurenai did not relax at all. She takes some time almost every day to hone herself in the practice field. The previous mission to assassinate the Mizukage of 4 generations left a big knot in her heart. She can't stand the various preferential treatment given to her by her captain, Hyojin, and she can't stand the fact that she is just a subordinate in the eyes of her captain. "Damn it, you look down on me, I will definitely surpass you." Whenever she thinks of this, Kurenai secretly encourages herself. She wants to prove to everyone that she is not worse than a Jutsu Kekai Genkai. Although she has the idea of competing with Hyojin, Kurenai also understands that some of Hyojin's advice to her is right, so during this period, she has been studying how to combine the family's secret genjutsu with taijutsu to develop more powerful and more versatile jutsu. At this time, a tall young man came over and said, "Kurenai, what a coincidence, I didn't expect to meet you here. By the way, there seems to be a new restaurant in the village today, let's go and have a try." It was Asma, who had just returned to the village not long ago, who came forward to chat with Kurenai. After several years of experience under the daimyo of the Land of Fire, Asma has obviously matured a lot, and is no longer the arrogant boy who contradicted his father in the special Jonin assessment. Glancing at Asma's attentive face, Kurenai shook her head and said, "No, I have a task tomorrow." Asma scratched his head and said, "Oh really, then, let's talk about it later." Kurenai didn't say anything more. After packing up her belongings, she directly walked past Asma and left the practice field. Looking at Kurenai's departing figure, Asma murmured, "Hey, is it my method of chatting up people wrong? But is this what Kakashi taught me?" After dragging her tired body back home, before she had time to sit on the sofa to rest, Kurenai felt as if she was being stared at by a sinister snake. "Kurenai, it seems that you have also grown up." A hoarse voice that seemed to contain magic came from behind Kurenai. Kurenai was shocked when she heard this. She suddenly turned around and saw a black shadow standing in the shadow of the room. "Orochimaru? Why are you in the village? What do you want?" Because the sun was setting, the sky was getting dark, so Kurenai couldn't see the appearance of the black shadow standing in the shadow, but she recognized the identity of the other party just by the trademark hoarse voice. Orochimaru came out of the shadow and said with a smile, "Don't be nervous, I just need you to do something for me." Kurenai suppressed the fear in her heart and took out a kunai from the ninja bag around her waist. "Are you kidding me? How could I help a traitor of my?" Chapter 448. The strength of Orochimaru has been engraved in the heart of every Mai ninja. Even Kakashi, the best in the same period, will be frightened when facing Orochimaru. In the original Chunin exam, Kakashi's first reaction after encountering Orochimaru was to try his best to die with Orochimaru. But after Orochimaru left, he suddenly realized that his idea was too stupid. But this does not mean that Kurenai will be captured. As a Mai Umbu who is directly under Naruto, she can accept defeat, but she can't accept cowardice from the bottom of her heart. Forcing herself to look directly into Orochimaru's eyes, Kurenai asked sternly, "What is your purpose in sneaking into the village?" Orochimaru laughed and said, "It's not good for you to know too much." Kurenai said angrily, "Even if it's you, you will pay the price for underestimating me." "Oh really?" Shrugging, Orochimaru asked indifferently, "What kind of price will it be? Isn't he afraid that I will ask for outside help and alarm the masters in the village?" Seeing that Orochimaru did not seem to have any intention of attacking immediately, Kurenai's heart was full of doubts. At the moment, Mai was heavily guarded inside and outside. As one of the Umbu, Kurenai was very clear about this. Not only was there Naruto 3 generations in the village, but Jiraiya and Tsunade Hime also returned to the village. Even if Orochimaru was strong, facing so many masters, he would certainly not be able to get any advantage. So she was very surprised why Orochimaru took the risk to sneak into the village to find her, and was not in a hurry to attack. No. Kurenai suddenly reacted. It's not that Orochimaru was not in a hurry to attack, but he had already attacked. However, by the time she reacted, her mind was already in a trance. After staggering a few steps, she fell to the ground and said intermittently, "Poison. Poison gas. You're despicable." Orochimaru walked over with a smile and squatted in front of Red. "This is the alabaster snake venom that I've modified. How do you feel?" Kurenai's consciousness gradually blurred. She didn't expect that one of the Sannin, Orochimaru, would use poison to deal with a special jonin like her. In fact, with Kurenai's strength, she shouldn't have made such a mistake, but Orochimaru's identity as one of the Sannin really gave her too much pressure, making her focus of vigilance on Orochimaru and ignore the surrounding environment. When he saw Orochimaru reaching his hand towards him, his eyelids were extremely red. Indignantly, his vision turned black and he fell into a coma. Through the murals, Jishui and Itachi, who had found clues, immediately split up and acted separately. Because both of them are members of the Uchiha clan, they are very familiar with the distribution of the ruins of the Uchiha clan. Coupled with the fact that they have the Manjikyu Sharingan, their insight is far superior to that of ordinary people, so in just a few days, they have already searched 7 or 8 tombs of the Uchiha Warring States period. In these abandoned cemeteries, most of the remains of Uchiha ancestors had been moved away by the Uchiha clan. The 2 of them had opened more than a dozen old tombs, but they found nothing. But when it came to the safety of the village, neither of them had any intention of stopping and continued the tomb-robbing journey. After opening another tomb of Uchiha ancestors, Itachi walked into the dark tomb with a solemn gaze. Although he hadn't seen the coffin inside, based on the length of the tomb and the size of the tomb, Itachi could judge that the identity of the Uchiha ancestors buried here must be extraordinary. It was most likely a certain leader of the Uchiha clan. At the end of the tomb, a stone tablet came into Itachi's sight. He looked at it and found that the stone tablet was very familiar. He seemed to have seen the same stone tablet when he was exploring a certain ruin before, but there was an obvious groove in the center of the stone tablet, and there was an obvious bulge in the center of the stone tablet. Coming to the stone tablet, Itachi studied it a little, and then reached out and pressed on the bulge in the center of the stone tablet. As Itachi pressed hard, a stone round plate fell from the bulge of the stone tablet. The size of the round plate seemed to correspond to the groove on the stone tablet in the previous ruin. Picking up the round plate, Itachi looked around and found that there was only this stone tablet at the end of the tomb. There was neither a tomb chamber nor a shadow of a coffin, so he said. It turned out to be a fake tomb. The clue of the round plate was so obvious. The clever Itachi naturally understood that the Uchiha ruins he had searched before must have hidden secrets that he hadn't discovered, so he sent a message to Jishui and rushed to the ruins. Jishui's speed was the fastest of Mai, only below Hyojin in the Tenseigan chakra mode, so before Itachi arrived, Jishui had already arrived. After meeting Itachi, the 2 entered the ruins together. Coming to the stone tablet, Jishui asked, "Is this the stone tablet you mentioned?" Itachi nodded, and immediately installed the round plate obtained in the tomb passage into the groove of the stone tablet. The size of the round plate was just right and it fit seamlessly. When the round plate was placed on the stone tablet, both Jishui and Itachi felt a wave of chakra at the same time, and then the ground trembled, revealing a downward passage. Jishui said, "Did you feel it?" Itachi gently nodded. Well, it's our Uchiha's genjutsu. Just at the moment when he installed the round plate in the groove of the stone tablet, the seal hidden in the stone tablet immediately triggered a genjutsu, but this genjutsu was not difficult for Jishui and Itachi, who have Manjikyu Sharingan, to break it in an instant. Through the downward passage, the two soon came to a tomb chamber. In the center of the tomb chamber there was a coffin, and on the side of the coffin there was a giant stone gourd sculpture, which looks very similar to the gourd in the mural. Walking around the coffin, Jishui said, "This coffin has never been opened." Itachi asked, "What should we do?" "The sword of Tokugawa is probably in it." In the previous tomb chamber, the remains in it were basically moved away by the family one after another, so Jishui and Itachi dared to open the coffin boldly. However, the coffin in front of them had obviously not been opened, and it was very likely that the remains of an ancestor of Uchiha were lying in it, so they were a little hesitant. After thinking for a while, Jishui said, "Inform Kuroto-senpai. He has Byakugan, and he will know at a glance whether the sword of Tokugawa is in the coffin or not." Itachi nodded, and then immediately released the communication crow. After that, the two of them searched in the tomb chamber, but the tomb area was not large. After a while, they gathered in front of the huge stone gourd sculpture next to the coffin. "I always feel that there is something strange about this stone gourd sculpture." Saying that, Itachi reached out to the stone gourd sculpture. Suddenly, Jishui on the side had a bad feeling, and she hurriedly said, "Don't." However, Jishui's warning was a step too late. The moment Itachi touched the stone gourd sculpture, he and Jishui were sucked into the stone gourd sculpture together. Chapter 449. Outside the Mai village. With her hands tied behind her back, Kurenai followed Orochimaru. Her face looked a little sluggish, but there was a stubborn look in her eyes. After a long time, Kurenai couldn't help but ask, "Where are you taking me?" Orochimaru replied casually, "You will know when we get there." Kurenai frowned. "If you want to attack the village through me, then you have the wrong idea." Orochimaru stopped and said with a smile, "You don't seem to know your situation." "Humph." Kurenai snorted heavily, not afraid of Orochimaru's threat at all. Staring at Kurenai's determined expression, Orochimaru smiled lightly and immediately withdrew his gaze. He took out a round card from his arms and looked at it thoughtfully while saying, "You only need to do one thing for me, and if it goes well, I can consider letting you go. Don't worry, this matter has nothing to do with my..." If Itachi was here, he would have found that the round card in Orochimaru's hand is almost exactly the same as the one he found. Obviously, Orochimaru has also been tracking the clues of the Tokugan sword. No, it should be said that Orochimaru is the first person to investigate the clues of the Tokugan sword. Several years before Hyojin began to deploy the search for the Tokugan sword, Orochimaru had already been collecting information to look for the legendary Tokugan sword. Like Itachi, Orochimaru also found a round card in a ruin, and through the clues of the round card, he successfully found the Uchiha ruin where the round card can be used to open the mechanism. However, unlike Jishui and Itachi, when he installed the round card in the groove of the stone tablet and activated the mechanism, the genjutsu on the stone tablet baffled him, making him unable to crack it. As one of the Sannin, Orochimaru really has any shortcomings, the genjutsu should be one of the most obvious ones. Jishui and Itachi broke the illusion in an instant. They did not even pay much attention to it. However, Orochimaru was stumped by it for several months. He was stopped in front of the stone tablet. Considering that violent destruction might cause unexpected changes, Orochimaru had to come up with other ideas. In Mai, the clan with the strongest genjutsu is naturally the Uchiha clan, but considering that the Uchiha clan has two Manjikyu Sharingan powerhouses, Jishui and Itachi, in order to avoid alerting the enemy, Orochimaru did not choose the Uchiha clan. In addition to the Uchiha clan, there are two other clans in my village that are best at genjutsu. They are the Kurenai clan and the Kurama clan. The Kurama clan has a small population, and after the death of the previous patriarch in the Third Shinobi War, there are only some old, weak women and children left in the clan. Therefore, Orochimaru naturally turned his attention to Kurenai of the Kurenai clan. Although the current Kurenai's comprehensive strength is not top-notch, but when it comes to genjutsu, she is almost one of the strongest genjutsu ninjas in the village other than the Uchiha clan. Putting the round plate back into his arms, Orochimaru glanced at Kurenai and thought to himself, maybe she can solve the genjutsu on the stone tablet, but I have to speed up. If Kuroto comes looking for me, it will be troublesome. Orochimaru knew that Kurenai is Hyojin's subordinate. Once she goes missing, Hyojin will inevitably search for her. In order to avoid trouble and disrupt his plan to find the Tenseigan, he immediately bit his finger and summoned a big snake. Then, he carried the dispirited Kurenai and jumped on the back of the snake. This big snake seemed to have some kind of innate ability. It produced wind under its abdomen, and with just a slight shake of its body, it rushed a long distance away. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared with Orochimaru and Red Kurenai's house in my village. Hyojin, who had activated the Byakugan, looked around with a gloomy face, searching for any possible clues. Kurenai's disappearance was naturally the first one to be alarmed, as the captain of the 7th Squad. Swish in the sound of the wind, Gale landed on the balcony and reported to Hyojin in the house. Captain, there is nothing in the practice field that Kurenai often goes to. Hyojin nodded. Although it is only a preliminary investigation, he can confirm that the place where Kurenai was attacked is here. It is Kurenai's own house. It seems that the attacker is a master. Kurenai has made rapid progress recently. In addition, she has received special training from the Umbu, so she is proficient in stealth and assassination. There may be many ninjas who can defeat her, but there are not many ninjas who can make her disappear quietly. However, the opponent can easily subdue Kurenai, and even leave no traces of fighting. It can be seen that the opponent is not weak. At this time, Shien led Asma to Kurenai's house and reported to Hyojin. He is the last person in the village to see Kurenai. Asma, who learned that Kurenai is missing, was very anxious. Before Hyojin asked him, he asked, "Did you find any clues? How could Kurenai disappear for no reason?" Hyojin moved his face to the side and said, "She should have been attacked." Asma said angrily, Who did it?" Hyojin shook his head silently. From the current situation, unless the opponent has an ulterior motive, the possibility of Kurenai's survival is not high. "I will definitely find her, I will definitely find her." Asma was a little lost, and he rushed out of the house while muttering. Hyojin's eyes gradually turned cold, and he said to himself, "How dare you touch my subordinates? Don't let me find you." After returning home, Hyojin, who is still thinking about Kurenai's disappearance, found a ninja crow standing on his windowsill. After opening the window, Hyojin took down the communication scroll tied to the ninja crow's leg. He glanced at it and said, "Hey, they found something so quickly?" The sword of 10 punches was related to whether or not it could restrain Obsidian, who has 2 shinwei, so it must be in his hands as soon as possible. Therefore, Hyojin temporarily put aside the matter of Kurenai's disappearance. After leaving a shadow clone in the village, Hyojin changed into the type A wind release clone and sneaked out of the village. After leaving the village, he immediately used the magnetic release technique, and a pair of black iron sand wings spread on his back. He quickly flew to the Uchiha ruins where Jishuei and Itachi sent the message. After a long time, he finally arrived at the Uchiha ruins. Landing on the dome of the ruins, Hyojin looked around and felt that it was very familiar. He said, "Hey, isn't this the place where Itachi and Sasuke had their final battle?" Hyojin quickly recognized that it was the Uchiha ruins where Itachi and Sasuke had their final battle in the original spacetime. Boom, 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 suddenly, there was a low rumbling sound in the distance. Hyojin looked over and saw smoke and dust flying over there. It seemed that there was a huge object rushing towards the ruins. Chapter 450. Under the mask of the gale pattern, the Byakugan in Suijin's eye sockets slowly opened, then looking at the rising smoke and dust in the distance, his brows gradually wrinkled. Orochimaru? In the distance, a huge green snake was rushing towards the ruins, and on its back stood two people. They were Orochimaru and the missing Kurenai. Humph, so it was Orochimaru who attacked Kurenai. No wonder he did it without leaving any clues. Snorting lightly, Hyojin had a lot of questions in his heart. Why did he kidnap Kurenai? Judging from the route Orochimaru took, he was obviously also coming for the ruins of Uchiha. Thinking of this, Hyojin suddenly understood. No wonder he left so quickly outside the root base. It turned out that he also found the clues of the Tenseigan. Did he kidnap Kurenai because he needed Kurenai's ability? Is it an illusion? Hyojin was not surprised that Orochimaru was looking for the Tenseigan. In the original space and time, when Orochimaru was sealed by Itachi with the Tenseigan, he once said to Itachi, "So the Tenseigan has been hidden by you all this time." It can be seen that Orochimaru spent a lot of time and effort looking for the Tenseigan. But this is also reasonable, for him, who has seen the power of the Rinnegan. If he wants to defeat Nagato, the artifact Tenseigan is undoubtedly his only hope. After all, he is a traitor of the Akatsuki, a target that Nagato wants to get rid of. Whether he is willing or not, he must consider the possibility of fighting with Nagato. In just a moment, the green snake arrived at the edge of the ruins of Uchiha. At this time, Orochimaru on the back of the green snake also found Hyojin standing quietly on the dome of the ruins of Uchiha. His face suddenly became very ugly. Looking at Kurenai behind Orochimaru, although she looked a little tired, there seemed to be no injuries on her body. Hyojin secretly breathed a sigh of relief, then said to Orochimaru coldly, "Let her go." The gloomy face of Orochimaru flashed a trace of surprise in his eyes. Not only Orochimaru, but also Kurenai, who was threatened by Orochimaru, was also surprised at this moment. She never thought that the person who saved her was not a Mai ninja, but a mysterious person dressed as a member of Amatsukami. Naturally, Hyojin said this deliberately. Although the Sword of 10 Fists was a divine weapon, it still needed to be taken by surprise in order to unleash its greatest power. If everyone knew that the Sword of 10 Fists was in his hands, they would be on guard against him, and the power of the Sword of 10 Fists would be greatly reduced. Therefore, Kuroto didn't want Orochimaru to know that Amatsukami was also looking for the Sword of Jutsu and had already found this place by following the clues, so he used Kuroto as an excuse to deliberately show that his appearance here was just to rescue Kuroto, who was kidnapped and had nothing to do with the Sword of Jutsu. The surprised Orochimaru's face sank and asked, "Does Amatsukami want to go against me?" Hyojin said lightly, "As long as you let her go, I will leave immediately." Seeing Hyojin's attitude, Orochimaru became interested and asked Hyojin with a smile, "Why do you care so much about a Mai ninja?" Hyojin replied, "It has nothing to do with you." Orochimaru smiled and looked at Kurenai with a scrutinizing face. "Don't look at me, I don't even know him." After retorting to Orochimaru, Kurenai secretly looked at Hyojin on the dome, thinking secretly, "The mask on his face is the pattern of the wind, so he should be the member of Amatsukami who has the magnetic release Kekkei limit, which is the companion of Amatsukami, but I don't know him. Why would he take the risk to save me?" At this time, Orochimaru put away the smile on his face and said solemnly, "In 3 days I will return her to you unscathed, is that okay?" Kurenai also looked at Kuroto in a daze, feeling a little nervous in her heart. She wasn't sure if Kuroto would really fight against Orochimaru, one of the Sannin, who almost stands at the peak of the shinobi world, just for her. Hyojin did not hesitate at all and directly said, "Let her go, immediately." Orochimaru smiled and said with a playful face, "In that case, I have no choice but to get rid of you." Hyojin's expression did not change at all. As a disciple of Orochimaru, he knew Orochimaru's nature better than anyone else, and he knew that the name Amatsukami would not be able to deter the lawless Orochimaru, and in the end they would have to fight. But for Kuroda this wasn't a bad thing. After all, he also hoped to have a good fight to his heart's content to test the combat ability of the Type A wind release clone, and Orochimaru, who couldn't be killed no matter how many times he fought, was obviously a good practice opponent. At this time, Orochimaru gently bit his finger, put his hands together, and with his hoarse voice, he said, "Spirit summoning technique, impure earth reincarnation." Boom! In a puff of white smoke, 2 upright coffins appeared on the back of the green snake. Looking at the 2 coffins marked with the words "First" and "Second" on the coffins, Hyojin, who was originally eager to fight, suddenly changed his expression. "Ugh, no way, this is too big?" Although he knew that Orochimaru had been studying the forbidden technique, impure earth reincarnation, Hyojin really did not think that he would have to fight the first and second generation Naruto in this way at this moment. Clang! As the lid of the coffin slowly opened and fell to the ground, 2 figures walked out of the coffin in a wobbly manner. Seeing the figure that walked out of the coffin, Red was dumbfounded. First? Second? Although the first and second generation had passed away for decades, as a Mai ninja, it did not take Red much effort to recognize the one in red armor. It was the first-generation Naruto who founded the Mai during the chaotic times, and the one in blue armor next to him was the first-generation Naruto's younger brother, the second-generation Naruto. Orochimaru can actually summon these 2 lords? How dare he fool the undead? At this time, mixed thoughts surged in Red's mind. In the midst of shock, her eyes subconsciously moved to Hyojin in the distance, and she said, "If he encountered this kind of thing, he would run away immediately, right?" Orochimaru crossed his arms in front of his chest, and said with an evil smile, "This is a technique that I have mastered not long ago, and I just happen to need a master to test it for me. Since you have sent yourself to me, then I won't be polite." After saying that, Orochimaru ordered the first and second generation impure earth bodies. "Kill him!" Swoosh swoosh in the sound of wind breaking, the first and second generation impure earth bodies leaped from the back of the green snake, and pounced on Hyojin who was on the dome of the ruins. Hyojin, who was cursing in his heart, could only bite the bullet and face it. Chapter 451. Bang, 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 the 3 figures' fists and feet collided with each other, producing a series of muffled sounds. The names of the first generation and the second generation were indeed quite intimidating. However, after exchanging blows, Hyojin found that whether it was strength or speed, the first generation and the second generation's impure earth body was not as strong as he had imagined. It could be said that it was far inferior to his Type A wind release clone body. Just SOSO. After testing the strength of the first generation and the second generation's impure earth body, Hyojin felt relieved. Then, his moves also became fierce. He directly punched the first generation's impure earth body in the face and sent it flying. Then, his figure swayed, turned around, and with a sweep, the second generation's impure earth body was also sent flying. Boom boom in the roar, the first generation and the second generation's impure earth bodies that were sent flying fiercely hit the stone wall in the distance. The 2 high walls that were originally standing on the top of the ruins each had a clear dent. On the back of the green snake, Orochimaru's eyes were cold, and he secretly said, "Damn, this guy's physical technique is so strong?" As the controller of the first generation and the second generation's impure earth body, Orochimaru naturally knew that these two impure earth bodies could not be compared to the real first generation and the second generation. This was because of the strength of the sacrifice factor, and also the restrictions that Orochimaru added himself. Because this was originally an experimental attempt, this time, the body sacrifice that Orochimaru prepared for the first generation and the second generation was just the most common Chunin's corpse. In the original space and time, he used the special white Zetsu as the sacrifice during the Fourth Ninja World War to summon the past generations of Naruto's impure earth body. On top of that, Orochimaru was wary of the first generation and second generation's strength. Before using the impure earth reincarnation, he had added several techniques to bind the first generation and second generation's spiritual bodies. Although this greatly increased his control over the first generation and second generation's impure earth physique, it also greatly weakened the first generation and second generation's strength. But even with all these restrictions, the physical technique level of the first generation and second generation earth form was definitely at the level of an elite jonin. Even if Orochimaru personally took action, it would take some effort to deal with these two earth form in the physical technique competition. So, after seeing Hyojin repelling the two earth forms so easily, Orochimaru showed obvious fear of Hyojin's physical technique strength. At this moment, Hyojin suddenly waved his right hand. Two waves of black iron sand separated from his body, engulfing outwards, firmly wrapping around the exceptional talent and second generation's dirt bodies that were lying in the wall depression, making them look like two iron sand silkworm cocoons. Then, Hyojin's gaze turned to Orochimaru, who was on the back of the green snake. Feeling the cold and bone-chilling killing intent from Hyojin, even Orochimaru, who was used to killing, could not help but tremble in his heart, and his originally playful expression gradually froze. Red, who was beside Orochimaru, slightly opened her mouth and murmured, "So strong." Swoosh! With a flash, Hyojin, who was on the dome of the ruins, leaped into the sky. Then, a pair of huge black wings spread out from his back. Orochimaru and Red, who were on the back of the green snake, raised their heads at the same time and looked at Hyojin in the sky. The huge black wings on Hyojin's back, together with his black cloak with golden edges, and the wind-pattern mask on his face, made Red even have the illusion that his opponent was a night angel. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, Hyojin flew to the back of the green snake, while the black spear made of iron sand in his hand accurately pierced Orochimaru's heart. "You!" Orochimaru looked at Hyojin in horror. His expression was full of disbelief. Kurenai was also shocked. "He killed Orochimaru?" Hyojin said lightly, "Put away your lame performance." Orochimaru put away the rich expression on his face, and the corner of his mouth twitched. "I thought you were just the most inconspicuous person in Amatsukami, but it seems that I have underestimated you." After saying that, Orochimaru's body exploded into a cloud of white smoke with a bang, and then the green snake under their feet also disappeared in a burst of white smoke. Ah! With the sudden disappearance of the green snake, Red, whose hands were still tied behind her back, suddenly lost her balance and cried out in shock. When the green snake stood up, it was more than 10 meters tall, close to the height of a 5-story building. Falling from such a height, if one's body was in a state of restraint, even a ninja would not be able to withstand it. Just when Red closed her eyes, thinking that she would not be able to escape, her falling body suddenly stopped. Huh! She opened her eyes abruptly and found herself in the arms of the member of Amatsukami wearing the wind-pattern mask. The rope that tied her hands had also been cut off. After landing steadily, Hyojin asked Red, "Are you okay?" Red was stunned for a moment. Although the other party's tone gave off a cold and distant feeling, she could clearly feel that the other party really cared about her. Seeing that Red seemed to be stunned, Hyojin thought that Orochimaru had done something to her body. He quickly used the supercilious eye to carefully observe Red's body and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Red, who recovered from her shock, quickly pushed Hyojin away and immediately turned her face to the side. "I'm fine. Who are you? Why did you save me?" Just as Hyojin was about to casually say something, the ground suddenly shook. Red, who was a little distracted, staggered and fell into Hyojin's arms again. Hyojin, however, did not care about Red. His eyes swept around and said, "We're in trouble." Red blurted out in surprise, "What trouble?" Before Red's voice died away, trees broke out of the ground one after another and rose from the ground. The trees that originally existed in the surroundings seemed to have come to life and grew wildly. Would release? Red was so shocked that she covered her mouth. At this time, Hyojin did not care about anything else and directly said, "Hold me tight." He had to rush out of this forest before the first-generation dirt body completely activated the descent of the world of trees. Otherwise, even with the magnetic escape, he would not be able to withstand the endless attacks of the wood escape. With a whoosh, a pair of huge black wings unfolded behind Kuroto's back, and immediately after that, he took off from the ground and flew towards the sky with Kuroto. However, the rapidly growing trees interweaved into an impenetrable net above Suijin's head, trapping him and Kurenai like a bird in a cage. The first-generation dirt body and second-generation dirt body that had broken free of the iron sand moved agilely in the forest that was like a maze. From different directions, they pounced on Hyojin and Red, who were entangled by the trees. On the dome of the ruins, Orochimaru, who had used the shadow clone technique to avoid Hyojin's surprise attack, was now looking at the fierce battle in the forest with great interest. Seeing that Hyojin was so protective of Red, he thought to himself, "Did this guy really stop me because of Red?" Chapter 452. Originally, Orochimaru did not believe that the members of Amatsukami suddenly appeared just to save Kurenai. After all, Kurenai was just an ordinary ninja. There was no reason for Amatsukami to spend so much effort to save her. However, when he saw Hyojin trying his best to save Kurenai, he was a little uncertain. Could it be that this is just Winchim's personal action and has nothing to do with Amatsukami? And it has nothing to do with the Sword of 10 Punches? Suddenly, Orochimaru had a guess in his mind. It was very likely that Winchim from Amatsukami knew Kurenai, and the two of them had some kind of relationship. In the forest, countless trees grew crazily and endlessly, entangling Hyojin. Although he tried his best to slash, the space he had to dodge and move around was being squeezed little by little. Kurenai wanted to help, but because of the remaining poison in her body, she could not use her strength at all and could not refine chakra. Seeing that Kurenai was entangled by a few branches and was about to be dragged out of his control area, Hyojin thought to himself, "Women are so troublesome." Immediately, he clenched his right fist and pulled it into his arms. A ball of black iron sand immediately turned into a big hand, grabbed Kurenai, and took her away from the branches. At this moment, he suddenly saw the second-generation Earth form not far away from him. It was standing upside down under a twisted tree trunk, its hands slowly forming a seal. "That is..." Hyojin's eyes narrowed, and he immediately shouted, "Oh no!" When developing the water release clone, Hyojin had studied a lot of water release ninjutsu, so he quickly recognized the ninjutsu that the second-generation Earth form was about to use. It was the extremely destructive S-class water release ninjutsu, Water Wave Breaker. Whoosh! With a crisp sound, a torrent of water was spat out from the mouth of the second-generation Earth form. This torrent of water was condensed into a water line as thick as a finger by the high-intensity water attribute chakra. Like a water knife, it easily cut down all the trees in front of it and went straight for Hyojin and Kurenai. Without any hesitation, Suijin appeared in front of Kuroto, blocking Kuroto's path. With this level of ninjutsu, Even if Kurenai was slightly scratched, she would be severely injured, if not dead, and with Kurenai's current physical state, she definitely can't dodge, so Hyojin can only choose to use his own body to resist. After all, it's just a clone. Red, who didn't know what was going on, stared blankly at Hyojin, who was standing in front of her. Something seemed to have been touched in her heart. Chi-Chi, the torrent, which had been condensed into a straight line, slashed towards the giant sand shield in front of Hyojin like a sharp blade, producing a sharp, ear-piercing sound that made people's eardrums hurt. Almost at the same time as the sharp sound rang out, the iron sand shield was sliced into two by the torrent. The torrent didn't lose any of its momentum after shattering the iron sand shield. It drew a beautiful arc in the air and slashed toward Hyojin. What? Kuroto had guessed that the iron shield formed by the magnet release wouldn't be able to block the water wave cut of the second-generation Earthform, but he didn't expect that the iron shield wouldn't even have the slightest effect. With a swoosh, the torrent slashed through Hyojin's body. Crack! The mask with the wind pattern on Hyojin's face shattered and fell to the ground. Not only that, the black cloak he was wearing with golden edges was also cut open, and blood gushed out from under the cloak. Huff, huff, half squatting on the ground, Hyojin lowered his head and panted heavily. His long gray hair covered his face. Red, who was behind him, was already at a loss. Seeing Hyojin's chest covered in blood, she said hurriedly, "Don't worry about me. Run quickly. No one can defeat the first generation and the second generation together." After panting a few times, Hyojin said in a deep voice, "Shut up and hide behind me." After saying that, he stood up and pulled Red behind him. At this moment, although he looked very miserable with blood flowing all over his body, it was actually only a few superficial wounds. Since the water-breaking ripple just now did not hurt his internal organs at all, it was completely blocked by the periosteum he created by activating the corpse bone meridian. At most, it only cut the skin on his chest. However, the wound was a little big and a lot of blood flowed out, so it looked very serious on the outside. "Orochimaru, don't force me to use the corpse bone meridian. Otherwise, I won't be able to stop myself from killing you." After cursing, Hyojin rolled his eyes and observed Orochimaru's position. The first generation and second generation's Earth body were immortal. No matter how many times they were destroyed, they could revive on the spot. Unless one used the truth-seeking ball or the sealing technique to deal with them, there was no other way. There was no need to mention the truth-seeking ball. The Type A wind escape clone that Hyojin was controlling couldn't be used at all. As for the sealing technique, not any random sealing technique could deal with the filthy Earth physique of the first generation and the second generation. In the original spacetime, the third generation used the Ghost Corpse seal. When facing such a situation, it could be seen that the shrewd and ruthless third generation had already determined that ordinary sealing techniques were ineffective against the filthy Earth physique of the first and second generation. Only the top-level sealing technique Corpse Ghost Seal could solve the problem. If it was just a one-on-one battle, Kuroto would still have the confidence to try using the four symbols seal, but 1 against 2, not to mention that there is also a hindrance by his side, trying to use the four symbols seal to deal with the impure Earth form of the first and second Mind-sama is simply a pipe dream. At this moment, the surroundings suddenly darkened. All the light seemed to be sucked away in an instant. Red exclaimed, "What's going on?" Hyojin quickly remembered a technique in his memory. It was an illusion technique called the dark walking technique. However, it didn't matter much to him who had the high purity of the Byakugan. In his field of vision with the Byakugan, the color of the surroundings only became a little darker. With a loud swooshing sound, the surrounding trees under the cover of the darkness surged forward. Seeing that the endless trees were about to completely swallow Red, Hyojin had a helpless expression. He could only put his palms together. Along with the crisp sound of the palm strike, the magnetic release chakra on Hyojin's body suddenly expanded. all the black iron sand quickly gathered into strong steel bars. In a breath's time, it had built an iron cage, covering Red's entire body in the iron cage. It blocked the surrounding trees that were surging forward. In the pitch-black darkness, Red, who was in the iron cage, felt around and shouted, "Hey, where are you?" However, there was no response from Hyojin. There was only the rustling sound of the trees moving. After using all the black iron sand to protect Red, in just a short moment, Hyojin's body was surrounded by 3 layers of endless trees. Trapped in the heavy entanglement, Hyojin curled his lips and thought to himself, "How unlucky. If I knew this would happen, I would have prepared more black iron sand before I left." Chapter 453. On the dome of the Uchiha ruins, Orochimaru crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at the fierce battle in the forest in the distance with a solemn expression. No ninja could resist the wood-release secret technique descent of the world of trees. This had been proven countless times when the Mai village was established. Therefore, Orochimaru was convinced that he would be the winner. But for some reason, he always felt weak in his heart, as if he had missed something. At this moment, the fierce battle in the forest came to an abrupt end. The crazily growing and twisting trees also stopped. Everything seemed to have returned to the calm before the battle. Orochimaru raised the corner of his mouth. "Is it over?" It was different from the impure earth reincarnation performed by Satu in the original space and time. On one hand, it was because the current research on impure earth reincarnation was not deep enough. On the other hand, it was to ensure absolute control of the first and second generation impure earth bodies. Orochimaru's impure earth reincarnation was more conservative than Satu's. He did not have the authority that a controller should have. For example, like Satu, Orochimaru could not use his will to occupy the body of the impure earth body at will, nor could he directly perceive the situation on the battlefield through the impure earth body like Satu and remotely control it from a long distance. But at the same time, he would not be perceived by the impure earth body like Satu. In the original space and time, because Satu established a long-distance chakra connection with the impure earth body, Itachi perceived him in reverse and found his hiding place directly. Itachi came to him and gave him an Izanami, which became the key to turning the tide of the Fourth Shinobi World War. Because he could not directly perceive the situation on the battlefield through the impure earth body, Orochimaru could not confirm the situation at the moment. But through observation from afar, the experienced Orochimaru judged that the battle in the forest had ended. Amatsukami is just SOSO. After a light snort, Orochimaru slowly raised his hands and was ready to cancel the psychic link. Suddenly, the earth trembled again. Orochimaru's eyes narrowed, and his raised hands stopped in the air. He said to himself, "Hey, that guy is still resisting?" Boom, boom, boom. As soon as he finished speaking, a shocking scene appeared in front of him. Amidst the rumbling sound waves, sharp white bone spears rose from the ground. These bone spears that broke out of the ground were extraordinarily sharp. All the trees that blocked their path were easily pierced and cut to pieces. In the blink of an eye, the originally boundless green forest had turned into a pale white forest of bones. The corpse bone vein. Orochimaru was startled and murmured, "There are other people here?" The pale white bone forest was still spreading in all directions. Soon, the bone spears that kept rising had invaded the ruins of Uchiha. The incomparably sharp bone blades were like tofu, easily piercing through the stone walls of the ruins and piercing through the circular dome of the ruins. Orochimaru's figure swayed as he narrowly avoided a bone spear that suddenly pierced from under his feet, and looking at the bone spear that quickly passed by his cheek and then extended into the air, Orochimaru's expression was incomparably solemn. At this time, a figure suddenly appeared on a bone spear behind Orochimaru. The figure held a bone blade in his hand and slashed at him without hesitation. Swoosh, the bone blade slashed across, bringing with it a splash of blood. Although Orochimaru was alarmed, he was still half a step late. Although he escaped the fate of being cut in half, his back was cut open by a deep wound that revealed his bones. As he turned around and retreated, he looked at the figure who had sneakily attacked him. He immediately frowned and said, "Windling?" Although the person who attacked him had merged into the bone spear and disappeared after the attack, he could still recognize the person's identity with a quick glance. Immediately, he was shocked and thought to himself, "This Windling actually has the magnetic release and the corpse bone vein, 2 blood limits. Could it be that he has also used the Chimera technique?" Suppressing the doubts in his heart, Orochimaru vigilantly looked around. He knew that the technique that the opponent had used was the strongest secret technique of the corpse bone vein, called Dance of the Early Fern. Once this secret technique was used, the entire bone forest would become the opponent's home ground. The opponent could quietly travel through the bone forest at will. Whether it was perceptive ninjutsu or occult techniques, it would be very difficult to detect. It was the trump card of the Kagaya clan. The only drawback of this technique was that it placed a heavy burden on the body of the user. Even the patriarch of the Kagaya clan would not use this technique unless it was absolutely necessary. Puff puff puff, at this time, there was a sound like steam rising from the wound on Orochimaru's back. In the white smoke, the deep wound on his back was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. That attack just now was definitely a fatal blow to a normal ninja, but to Orochimaru, it was nothing. He had mastered the flesh regeneration secret technique and the undead reincarnation forbidden technique, so he could unscrupulously squeeze out the potential of his body. Even if he used up the number of cell divisions in his body, he could just change to another body. Boom boom boom. The forest in the distance was also very lively at this time. The trees and the bone spears were intertwined and entangled with each other. One moment, countless trees would entangle and break the bone spears, and the next moment, the bone spears would cut down the trees one by one. Orochimaru glanced in the distance. At this time, there was no longer any meaning for the first generation and second generation's impure earth form to continue entangling with the bone spears in the forest. So, he wanted to make a hand seal and summon them over. As long as he had the first generation and second generation's impure earth form by his side, he was confident that he could drag it out until the opponent's chakra was exhausted. But just as he was about to make a hand seal, a few figures suddenly jumped out from the bone spears in all directions and pounced at him together. Bone doppelganger? Orochimaru's face darkened. He immediately pushed his hands outwards and shouted, "Hidden Shadow Snake Hand!" Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Countless poisonous snakes as thick as an arm shot out from Orochimaru's sleeves and entangled the bone doppelganger that was pouncing on him. But before these poisonous snakes could get close, they were cut into pieces by Hyojin's bone doppelganger with its bone blade. In a burst of bloody mist, they turned into indistinguishable lumps of flesh that were indistinguishable. Orochimaru frowned slightly. He quickly took out 2 kunai and guarded in front of him. Bang! With a sharp crisp sound, a bone doppelganger waved its bone blade and cut off the kunai in Orochimaru's hand along with his arm. Hiss! Orochimaru sucked in a breath of cold air. His snake-like pupils suddenly shrank, and his face was full of surprise. He knew that the opponent's bone spears were very sharp, but he didn't expect them to be this sharp. They were far stronger than the strength of Kimimara's bone blade. They were almost comparable to his Kusanagi sword. Instantly, he fiercely patted his abdomen with his remaining hand and spat out a Kusanagi sword from his mouth. He used the Kusanagi sword in his mouth to block a few bone blade attacks. Then, his figure flashed and he fled into the distant forest. Chapter 454. Orochimaru wasn't afraid of normal physical attack. However, when he faced Hyojin's bone blade that could cut through iron like mud, his elusive figure, and his swift and fierce physical skills, he felt a sense of fear that he hadn't felt for a long time. After all, if his body was cut into pieces, the flesh regeneration secret technique would be meaningless. Clang clang, while running, Orochimaru kept using his Kusanagi no Tsurugi to block Hyojin's bone clone's attack. The ear-piercing sound of metal clashing could be heard incessantly, as if he was forging iron. Why is this guy's physical skills so strong? Orochimaru claimed that his physical skills weren't bad, and he had seen many physical skills experts before. However, he had never met an opponent as fierce and ghostly as the one in front of him. Suddenly, he felt as if he had returned to the time when he was training with Hitaki Shwomo in the village. Indeed, the pressure that the opponent in front of him gave him reminded him of the strong man known as Mai's White Fan, the man who killed his enemies with just a short knife. Looking at Orochimaru, who was running away in a panic, Hyojin's expression was calm as he shuttled through the bone forest. After many years of training, his physical skills had been continuously improving. In addition, his Type A wind release clone body was a mutated body with a small probability. It had a pure bloodline and excellent bones. It was almost perfect in every aspect, far surpassing his water release clone and fire release clone. It was even stronger than his Een release clone. Coupled with the high-purity Byakugan and the corpse bone meridian that was even stronger than Kimimaro, he was simply a merciless killing machine. It was only because he met Orochimaru that he was able to hold on for a long time. If it was any other enemy, he would have killed them like cutting melons and vegetables. Swoosh, along with the sound of wind breaking, the ghostly bone blade slashed at Orochimaru again, cutting him in half from the waist. Blood splattered all over the ground, dyeing the white bone spears around them red. Only half of Orochimaru's body was left. He groaned as he crawled on the ground, struggling in vain. At this time, Hyojin stepped out of a bone spear and glanced at Orochimaru coldly. Through the observation of the Byakugan, he could confirm that the Orochimaru in front of him was not a shadow clone, but his real body. This was because shadow clones would disappear after being attacked. Even in the final battle with Sasuke in the original space, Naruto's shadow clone that contained the Yang release and immortal arts could only block punches and kick. It would also disappear if it was pierced by ninja art. Orochimaru turned over his body with difficulty and looked at Hyojin. He was stunned. "Your eyes?" As the mask was damaged in the previous battle, the appearance of the Type A wind release clone was revealed. Orochimaru immediately noticed the Byakugan in Hyojin's eye socket. After noticing this, Orochimaru was sure that this Winchime from Amatsukami must have used the Chimera technique. Otherwise, it was hard for him to think of any other method that could combine the Byakugan, bone meridian, and magnet release bloodline limit on one person. However, he did not associate the Winchime in front of him with Hyojin. Because the Type A wind release clone was a mutant, although there was Hyojin's shadow between its brows, its overall appearance was quite different from Hyojin's. Moreover, it had a head of white hair, and its temperament was completely different from Hyojin's. Therefore, it was hard to link the two together. Rumble, the rumbling sound from afar continued, and the ground trembled from time to time. The battle between the wood release and the bone meridian in the forest did not stop. In such a noisy background, Kuroda walked slowly towards Orochimaru, without the slightest complacency of defeating Sensei on his face, because he knew very well that Orochimaru was far from exhausted, and the current look on his face was most likely an act. Stopping in front of Orochimaru's body, Hyojin said coldly, "You're not dead yet. What an amazing life force." Orochimaru looked a little dispirited, but he still grinned and said, "As expected, the people from Amatsukami are not to be underestimated." Hyojin stared at Orochimaru. "Are these your last words?" Orochimaru smiled strangely. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and spat out a green mist. Kuroda, who was already prepared, retreated more than 10 meters away. Although he doesn't know what the green mist that came out of Orochimaru's mouth is, he naturally won't do such a stupid thing as putting himself in danger. At this time, Orochimaru's half-body in the green mist stimulated a very strong chakra fluctuation. Not good. Hyojin rushed over and used a D-class wind release ninjutsu to disperse the green mist. Then he found that half of Orochimaru's body on the ground was only a layer of sticky skin. Immediately after, Kuroto swept his gaze around and discovered that Orochimaru, who was not far from him, was flying towards the direction of the first-generation and second-generation dirtiness body. Tisk, it's Orochimaru-style substitution jutsu. Hyojin immediately recognized the technique that Orochimaru used. This Orochimaru-style substitution jutsu was different from other technique. Rather than saying it was a substitution jutsu, it was more appropriate to say that it was a regenerative jutsu that was similar to a snake molting its skin. In the original space and time, Sasuke was completely immune to Itachi's Amaterasu with this technique. One should know that the burning of Amaterasu was something that even the three-tailed Jinchuriki Yagura could not withstand and lost consciousness in the blink of an eye. But Sasuke was able to use the Orochimaru-style substitution jutsu to deceive Itachi. Even if Itachi had gone easy on him, it was enough to show how powerful this substitution jutsu was. Of course, this powerful technique also has its drawbacks, that is, it consumes a huge amount of chakra every time it is used, and it can only be used once in a battle. Whoosh! In a flash, Hyojin chased after Hiruzen. Even if he didn't use the bone vein to travel through the bone forest or the magnet release, the speed of Hyojin's Type A wind release clone was faster than his Yin release and was comparable to the flash Shishui. Therefore, with just a few moves, he was able to close the distance between him and Orochimaru. Orochimaru turned his head around and glanced at Kuroto, who was chasing after him. His expression was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. He never thought that he would be forced to use the Orochimaru Ryu substitution jutsu. While he was angry, he also became even more wary of wind chimes. Because everyone in the shinobi world knew that Hirako used the Chimera technique to fuse a total of 5 Kekkei Genkai, so he suspected that in addition to the Byakugan, bone vein, and magnet release, the wind chime behind him might have other Kekkei Genkai hidden. Chapter 455. Soon, the two of them arrived at the battlefield in the forest. Stop him! Orochimaru shouted at the first generation and second generation's impure earth bodies. The first generation and second generation's impure earth bodies that had been fighting the bone forest mechanically turned around and looked at Hyojin, who was following closely behind Orochimaru. Tisk! Coughing lightly, Suijin immediately activated the body flicker technique. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, without even the sound of wind breaking, Hyojin had flashed behind the second generation's impure earth body and completed his slash. Under the sharp bone blade, the second generation's impure earth body was no different from a block of tofu. It was sliced into two without any resistance, and its body was shredded like paper in the wind. Hyojin immediately formed a seal with both hands, preparing to use the 4 symbols seal to seal the second generation's impure earth body while it was recovering. However, before he could complete the seal, a thin branch quietly reached out to his left leg and wrapped around his left ankle, yanking him away. While he was being yanked into the air, Hyojin's expression did not change. He only glanced at his ankle. In an instant, a bone blade extended from his ankle and cut the thin branch that wrapped around him into pieces. Then, the bone blade retracted back into his flesh. Then, a bone spear not far away proactively reached out and caught him in midair. Standing on top of the bone spear, Hyojin placed one hand on his waist and stared coldly at Orochimaru below. Orochimaru's face was gloomy, and his eyes were flickering as if he was plotting something. Meanwhile, the first generation and second generation's impure earth bodies were like two door gods, guarding in front of Orochimaru. While the two of them were confronting each other, Red, who was in the iron sand cage, stared at Hyojin, who was standing on the bone spear, through the gap of the cage. So this is what he looks like. After a pause, Red was confused. But I don't even know him. Why would he risk his life to save me? Why died? Immediately after, Red's attention was attracted by the white eyes of Hyojin's Type A Wind Shield clone. Because Captain Hyojin is a member of the Hyuga clan, Kuroto is no stranger to the Hyuga clan, so when she noticed the Byakugan in the eye sockets of the Type A Wind Release clone, her first reaction was to look at the forehead of the Type A Wind Release clone, and immediately thought to herself, unlike Kuroto, he doesn't have the caged bird curse. Is he a member of the Hyuga clan? Suddenly, a gust of wind blew past, rustling the leaves on the trees. Hyojin and Orochimaru, who were in a stalemate, did not move. There was no doubt that Orochimaru had to admit that he had underestimated Wind Chime, a member of God's organization. Right now, he no longer had any interest in continuing the fight. After all, he had no conflict with Amatsukami, and he didn't want to provoke Amatsukami while being chased by Akatsuki. However, Kuroto's speed was too fast, and his moves were sharp and concise. There was almost no extra movement, and with the help of the Byakugan that could see through things, he might make an irreversible mistake if he was careless. Therefore, even if he wanted to retreat for the current Orochimaru, he needed to spend some time planning. Otherwise, he might inexplicably lose his head during the retreat. At this time, Orochimaru's snake-like vertical pupils inadvertently glanced at Red, who was puzzled by countless questions in the black iron cage, and an idea suddenly came to his mind. Immediately, he slowly stretched out his hands and pressed them on the back of the first generation and second generation. In an instant, the first generation and second generation activated ninjutsu at the same time. Wood release, ranking technique. Water release, water blast. Clang 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 with the sound of wooden stakes closing and closing, a huge wooden shield carved with a ghost face rose from the ground and protected Orochimaru inside it. At the same time, under the sound of second gen's palm strike, a huge wave appeared out of thin air, instantly drowning the forest. Second gen took advantage of the situation and dived into the water, quickly swimming towards Red, who was trapped in the iron cage underwater. Hyojin, who was standing on the top of the bone spear, was naturally not affected by second generation's water release ninjutsu, but he also realized that Orochimaru's target was not him, but Red, who was trapped in the iron cage. So, his eyes turned to the water and looked at the second generation, who was swimming towards Red. Second generation's speed was very fast underwater, like a fish living in the sea, and in a few seconds, it was close to the iron cage. Hyojin curled his lips and his body merged into the bone spear. Soon, Hyojin leaned out of the bone spear near the iron cage and reached out to grab Red in the iron cage. The iron cage was gently touched by his hand and suddenly collapsed, revealing a round hole that could pass a person. Because of being submerged in water and the remaining poison in her body, Red, who was in a very bad condition in the iron cage, was already suffocating and struggling violently in the iron cage. After being caught by Hyojin's hand, she seemed to have caught a life-saving straw and immediately hugged Hyojin's hand. Suddenly, second generation rushed over in the water and waved the kunai in his hand toward Hyojin. Suijin doesn't have any experience in fighting underwater, plus one of his hands was grabbed by Kuroto, so he was in a bit of a difficult situation. Second generation Earth form took the opportunity to throw the kunai towards Kuroto regardless of the danger of being cut by the bone blades. Swoosh! Just as the bone blade in Kuroto's hand was about to cut through second Earth monster's figure suddenly disappeared and reappeared beside Kuroto, grabbing the kunai that was thrown at Kuroto just now and slashing at Kuroto. In an instant, A large area of Red's chest was stained with blood. Hyojin's eyes turned cold. Flying Thunder God technique? After the successful sneak attack, second generation did not fight with Hyojin and immediately swam away. At the same time, the water was also rapidly receding. When the second generation Filth Soil Body and the first generation Filth Soil Body converged, the water that had flooded the entire forest had completely receded, leaving only a muddy ground. Hyojin glanced at Orochimaru, who had taken the opportunity to escape in a panic. He did not choose to chase after him because he had already noticed that when second generation sneak attacked Red, it had secretly left a string of techniques on the back of Red's waist. Looking at the style of the technique, it was the marking technique of second generation's Flying Thunder God technique. If Hyojin pursued at this time, second generation could use the Flying Thunder God technique to teleport over and kill Red at any time. Orochimaru, who was fleeing in panic, looked back at the battlefield behind him. After confirming that Hyojin did not choose to chase after him, he let out a long sigh of relief and thought to himself, "It seems that Winchim's appearance here is not because of the Sword of 10 Punches. How unlucky. Forget it, I'll think about the Sword of 10 Punches later." The reason why Orochimaru asked the second-generation Dirt Body to ambush Kurenai was not only to free himself, but also to test whether Winchim's appearance here was really just for Kurenai. Chapter 456. After watching Orochimaru flee in panic, Hyojin turned his attention to Red. At this time, Red had fainted because of excessive blood loss. Her chest was completely stained with blood, and the torn clothes revealed the white skin inside. Hyojin's eyes focused, and he carefully examined Red's injury with the Byakugan. After a moment, he breathed a sigh of relief. It's not too bad, because the purpose of the sneak attack on Kuroto was to delay Kuroto and create an opportunity for Orochimaru to escape. The second Dame-sama's sneak attack on Kuroto was very ingenious. It avoided Kuroto's throat, heart, and other vital points, and only left a shallow but long wound on her chest. Although it severely injured her, it didn't immediately endanger her life. Of course, if Hyojin did not stay to treat Red in time, she would definitely die after a long time. The situation was urgent. Hyojin directly put Red on the ground, and then skillfully removed her shirt. Although Kuroto himself is not a medical ninja, and he doesn't know any medical ninjutsu, but the Ryumyaku chakra inside the gourd artifact around his waist has a certain restorative effect on the body because it contains natural energy, so he infused the Ryumyaku chakra into Kuroto's body while bandaging her wounds. While Hyojin was busy treating Red, the forest of bones around him gradually collapsed. The originally tough bone spears were broken into fine white powder, and when the wind blew, they immediately turned into flying powder and flew all over the sky. Attracted by the flying powder, Hyojin looked up at the sky. Puff, suddenly, he felt a sharp pain and immediately coughed up a big mouthful of blood. Because there was no warning before, his blood just sprayed on Red's face, smearing her face. Her face was splashed with warm blood, and she woke up in a daze, only to see Suijin covering his mouth and staring at her. Then she found that her upper body was bare, and her chest and shoulders were exposed. She was ashamed and angry at the same time, and fainted again before she could take a breath. Seeing that Red had just woken up, and fainted again before she could say a word, Hyojin wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and wondered, "Hey, why is her face so red? Does she have a fever?" After a simple bandage of Red's wound, Hyojin turned Red over and checked the Flying Thunder God technique coordinates left on her waist by the second generation. Rubbing his chin, Kuroto pondered, "I need to get rid of this coordinate technique. As long as this coordinate technique existed, Red would always be under the threat of the second generation. Therefore, it was not enough to just treat Red's injury. He must remove this coordinate technique to ensure her safety." The coordinate technique left on Red by the second generation could actually be seen as a chakra. As long as a stronger chakra was used to offset it, it could be completely removed. However, this kind of elimination required time. Even with the chakra strength of the clone body type A, it will take at least an hour or so to completely erase the coordinates left by the second-generation Earth form on Kuroto's body, and during this time, the clone body type A can't be disturbed. Therefore, if the coordinate technique of the Flying Thunder God technique was placed on one's body during a battle, it would be very passive. Only by casting a sealing technique on oneself could the coordinate technique on one's body be rendered ineffective. In the blink of an eye, an hour had passed. After an hour of hard work, Hyojin finally removed the coordinate technique left on Red by the second generation. He then stood up and looked at the Uchiha ruins not far away. What the hell are Jishui and Itachi doing? I've been fighting outside, but why haven't they reacted at all? Haven't they arrived yet? Hyojin quickly denied this guess because when he received the message from the Ninja Crow, Jishui and Itachi should have already arrived here. Could it be that there was an accident? Hyojin's face darkened, and then he walked toward the Uchiha ruins. Behind him, the black iron sand carried the unconscious Red and floated in the air, slowly following behind him. Not long after, Hyojin arrived inside the Uchiha ruins. Puff, at this time, he spat out a big mouthful of blood, and his whole body staggered a few steps, almost falling to the ground. At the same time, the iron sand ball behind him that was floating in the air with Red also began to collapse. As it disintegrated, the black iron sand fell from the iron sand ball bit by bit. Hyojin quickly leaned against a wall and controlled the iron sand to slowly put the unconscious Red on the ground. After panting for a while, he curled his lips and said, "Damn, I didn't expect the blood inheritance disease to be so fierce. It seems that using the bone vein this time was a bit too much." From the first time he spat out blood, Hyojin knew that it was the bone vein blood inheritance disease that was causing trouble. The Type A wind release clone was too good, and because of this, it was always under the threat of the blood inheritance disease. In terms of situation, it was even more dangerous than Kimimaro. But because it was inevitable, Hyojin didn't care too much. After wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, he didn't care about Red anymore. He directly put Red aside and started to look for Jishui and Itachi in the ruins alone. The battle just now has caused serious damage to the Uchiha ruins, the dome in many areas has collapsed, and the internal structure has also suffered a lot of damage. Some of the stone chambers have even been destroyed beyond recognition. With the help of the Byakugan, Hyojin quickly found the tomb hidden underground. But there was no one in the tomb. There was only an empty coffin and a giant stone statue in the shape of a gourd. Touching the stone gourd statue, Hyojin murmured, "The sword of 10 punches seems to be in the shape of a gourd. Could it be that this stone gourd statue is the clue that Jishui and Itachi found?" Hyojin didn't know what happened in the tomb. In the vision of the Byakugan, no matter if it was the empty coffin or the stone gourd statue, there was nothing abnormal. There was also no trace of chakra. The sun set and the moon rose. Soon night fell. Under the beautiful moonlight, Red woke up. She propped herself up and looked around. She found that she was lying on the dome of the Uchiha ruins, and the member of God's organization who had saved her was sitting not far away. As if remembering something, Red quickly looked down and found that she was still naked, but her chest was wrapped in a very skillful bandage. Seeing that Red had woken up, Hyojin walked over and asked casually, "How do you feel?" Red said angrily, "Where are my clothes? You saw them?" Although it was an urgent matter, it was still a violation of Kurenai's privacy. Kuroto felt that he really should explain a little, but he didn't know how to explain, so he thought of praising Kurenai to ease the atmosphere, so for some reason, he said, "Well, you are developing well." Chapter 457. As soon as the words came out of his mouth, Hyojin realized that he had said the wrong thing. Words like well-developed were his usual comments on clones. It was obviously impolite to use it to compliment others at this time. It's been a long time since I praised a girl. I'm really rusty. Looking at Kuroto's red face, Kuroto sighed inwardly. Then, he waved his hand and explained awkwardly, I'm sorry. That's not what I meant. I wanted to say that your breasts are nice. That's not what I meant. What I wanted to say is, it would have been better if Hyojin didn't explain himself. As soon as he did, Red slapped him and shouted, Despicable! Kuroto casually blocked Kurenai's slap and said with a smug smile, You won't be able to hit me with this speed. You. Red was angry and furious. She suddenly withdrew her hand and turned her back to him. Feeling that he was making things worse, Hyojin didn't bother to explain anymore. He had saved Red's life anyway, so he didn't owe her anything. So, he said calmly, if your body has recovered, you should leave now. At this time, Red noticed that her shirt was stained with blood. She put on her clothes and asked in a low voice, Why did you save me? What's your purpose? Purpose? With a chuckle, Hyojin said, Don't misunderstand. I only saved you to stop Orochimaru's operation. The main purpose of this battle with Orochimaru is actually to prevent Orochimaru from finding clues about the whereabouts of Jutsu. As for rescuing Kuroto, in addition to the fact that Kuroto is his subordinate, he also wants to use the excuse of rescuing Kuroto to create an excuse for the battle to cover up the fact that Amatsukami is also looking for the whereabouts of Jutsu, so that Amatsukami and Orochimaru won't be able to detect any clues. In addition, one of the purposes of this battle was to test the Wind Release Clone's combat ability. So, in this rescue mission against Orochimaru, Red's reason only accounted for 1/3 of the total. The real reason was the Sword of 10 Punches and the test of the actual combat ability of the Type A Wind Release Clone. Red stared at Hyojin and said, You can't fool me. Hyojin was a little confused. Kurenai lowered her head and said to herself, Although I don't know how Orochimaru did it, but I have seen with my own eyes that Hashirama was able to summon Hashirama's wood release ninjutsu, and Hashirama's water release ninjutsu can't be faked. If you just want to stop Orochimaru, there is no need to divert your attention to protect me while fighting against such a strong person. And you even stood in front of me and blocked the second's water-breaking wave for me. As she spoke, Red's voice became softer and softer. Towards the end, it was almost inaudible. Hyojin said helplessly, I think you have misunderstood. The reason why he blocked the second-generation Dirt Physique's Water Ripple for Red was because his Type A Wind Escape clone had the Bone Vein to protect him. He was confident that he could block the second-generation Dirt Physique's Water Ripple, at a small cost. Secondly, he was the one controlling the clone, so his fighting style was more daring. If he was using his original body, he would not have taken the risk. Red stole a glance at Hyojin. Her eyes wandered around his white hair and white eyes for a while. She changed the topic and said, You are from the Hyuga family, right? Why do you have so many Kekii limits? Hyojin curled his lips and said, It's a secret. The mask was broken during the battle, revealing the white eyes. This was indeed an accident. Hyojin had a headache at this moment. He did not know how to prevent the information from being leaked. After all, Red was a member of the Umbu. When she returned to the village, she would definitely report everything. By then, the Hyuga clan would probably become the second Mai clan to have a relationship with Amatsukami after the Uchiha clan. Red said softly, My captain is also from the Hyuga family. Maybe you guys know each other. Hyojin did not answer. He turned his head to the side and secretly thought about how to deal with the information leak. Seeing that Hyojin did not say anything, Red thought that Hyojin did not want to talk about the Hyuga family. So she thought, did he have some conflict with the Hyuga family? That's why he left the family and joined Amatsukami? Puff, suddenly, Hyojin, who was pondering over this matter, spat out a mouthful of blood without warning. Red was taken aback and quickly went forward to support Hyojin. Are you okay? Is it the injury from before? Hyojin waved his hand. I'm fine. Even though he had predicted that the blood secondary disease would break out sooner or later, he had still underestimated its power. In just half a day, he had already vomited blood 4 or 5 times, and each time, there was no warning at all. Naturally, Red didn't know about the hereditary disease. She thought that Hyojin vomited blood because he was injured by the second king's water ripple in order to save her. She subconsciously wanted to check on the injury on Hyojin's chest. Hyojin stopped Red's hand from reaching for his chest. It's none of your business. You should leave now. It's not safe here. So be it. Red angrily turned her head to the side. After a moment she asked, by the way, what's your name? I will definitely return the favor for saving me this time. Anyway, the information about the Type A wind release clone had already been leaked, so there was no value in keeping his code name a secret. So, Hyojin replied, Kamikaze. Kamikaze, Red muttered a few times and looked at Hyojin for the last time. Then, with a leap, she disappeared from the dome of the ruins. Looking at Kuroto's departing figure, Kuroto rubbed his chin and pondered. I am Kuroto's captain, she will definitely report to me first when she returns. What can I do to her? In a dark base. Seeing that Orochimaru had returned to the base, Do, who stayed behind, immediately greeted him and said in surprise, Lord Orochimaru, why do you look so bad? Orochimaru said with a gloomy face, I met a troublesome guy. Do was a little surprised. Looking at the whole shinobi world, there aren't many people who can be called troublesome by Orochimaru, so he asked curiously, is it someone from Akatsuki? Orochimaru didn't want to say much, so he waved his hand and said, You can go back, I want to take a rest. Do didn't dare to disobey and quickly replied, Yes. After Dooku retreated, Orochimaru came to a secret compartment and used hand seals to remove the seal on it. He then took out a scroll with the words, Chimera Technique, clearly written on it in large letters. Hiriko's strength has greatly increased because of the Chimera Technique, so if Orochimaru says that he isn't jealous at all, he would be lying. But after analyzing the Chimera Technique, Orochimaru is very clear about the drawbacks and hidden dangers of this forbidden technique, so his interest in this technique has decreased a lot. But today, he suffered a crushing defeat in the hands of Kamikaze, so he can't help but doubt whether his previous judgment of the Chimera Technique was too arbitrary. Chapter 458. Orochimaru flipped through the scroll of the Oni-Yero technique again. Sometimes, his brows were tightly furrowed, and sometimes, the corners of his mouth were raised. With Orochimaru's shrewd eyesight, he could easily tell what kind of hidden dangers existed in this Oni-Yero technique that Hiruhu developed, even without trying it himself. Even so, he couldn't deny that the Ghost Yero technique had great potential. It was a forbidden technique that could truly change a person's nature. After all, no matter who it is, once one fuses with 5 types of Kekii limit, their strength will inevitably increase explosively. Hiriko, who developed the Chimera technique, is the best example of this. Before completing the Kekii Genkai fusion ritual, Orochimaru wouldn't even bother to look at a minor character like Hiriko in the eye. But after the completion of the Kekii Genkai fusion ritual, Orochimaru paid the price for his arrogance. He was easily subdued by Hiriko's Sharingan Genjutsu. If not for Hyojin, who was controlling the fire release clone at that time, Orochimaru might have already died in Hiriko's hands. After being subdued by the genjutsu of Hiriko and Itachi Uchiha, Orochimaru faintly realized the flaws of the undead reincarnation forbidden technique that he developed, and it also made him realize that there seems to be a problem with his soul body. Not only did his resistance to genjutsu not increase because of the change of his young and strong body, but because of the change of his body, Orochimaru's resistance to genjutsu has weakened. The reason why Orochimaru desires Uchiha's body and the Sharingan is also because he wants to make up for his shortcomings in genjutsu by obtaining the Sharingan that represents in release. Putting down the scroll of Chimera technique in his hand, Orochimaru fell into deep thought. Just like the warning Hyojin gave to Danzo at the root base, the demon sprout's unparalleled ability to fuse flesh and blood was a double-edged sword. It could devour other people's blood limit, but it could also devour itself. Orochimaru, who was proficient in human body modification, knew better than anyone else that once the ghost sprout went out of control, not only would it contaminate the body, but it would also cause great damage to the spirit body. Orochimaru, who had mastered the forbidden technique of undead reincarnation, might not care about the damage to his physical body, but he didn't dare to ignore the damage to his spirit body. Therefore, even though he coveted Hirako and Wind Chime's ability to wield multiple Kekii Genkai, he still couldn't make up his mind. Suddenly, Orochimaru thought to himself, Danzo has been blinded by Naruto's position. He must not be able to resist the temptation of the Chimera technique. Perhaps I can use him to collect experimental data and further improve the Chimera technique. On the dome of the Uchiha ruins. The moonlight was like a silver waterfall sprinkling on the earth. Under the picturesque moonlight, Hyojin sat cross-legged on the dome, carefully examining his body with the whites of his eyes. Through the whites of his eyes, he found that the flesh around the spine of the Type A wind-release clone body was inflamed, and the inflammation seemed to be spreading. After deactivating the whites of his eyes, Hyojin had a distressed expression on his face. He never thought that one day he would be distressed because his clone body was too good, but such a ridiculous thing happened right in front of his eyes. Although he had only gone through one fierce battle, he could clearly feel that the Type A Wind Escape clone body and his own spirit body had almost reached perfection. Every move he made was just like the In body. There was no sense of sluggishness when the Water Escape clone and the Fire Escape clone were just getting used to each other. However, because the Type A Wind Release clone body was too good, the outbreak of the Kekii Genkai disease was earlier and fiercer than what he had expected. He didn't need to go back to the laboratory to take a blood test. He could estimate that the common killer gray bones in the Type A Wind Release clone body's blood had already surpassed Kimimara's. I need to avoid using the bone vein in the future. Otherwise, this clone body will collapse soon. Although not using the bone vein wouldn't prevent the Kekii Genkai disease, it could at least slow down the corrosion of the Kekii Genkai disease. After shaking his head and sighing, Hyojin supported his body and stood up. The Uchiha ruin was only so big. He had already searched inside and out, but he didn't find anything. He had also waited for a long time, but he still didn't see Jishuei and Itachi. After thinking for a while, he decided to return to the village first. Since Jishuei and Itachi were together, he didn't need to worry about their safety. Since Hyojin had the flying ability of the magnetic release, he returned to the village first. It wasn't until the evening of the second day that Red dragged her tired body back to the village. In the My Hospital, after Red finished her treatment, Hyojin took her to an empty room and started to interrogate her. As an Umbu under the direct command of Hokage, Kuroto is sure that Sandaime will find time to personally ask Kuroto about this matter in the next 2 days, so he must get Kuroto's report first before he can do anything about it. Kuroto is sure that Sandaime will take the time to personally ask Kuroto about this matter, so he must get Kuroto's report first before he can do anything about it. Red also knew how serious this matter was, so she reported to Hyojin how Orochimaru attacked her. While Hyojin was recording, he looked at Red and asked, "How did you escape from Orochimaru?" He had already made up his mind. As long as Red told him the detailed information about the wind chime, he would lead her to believe that she was poisoned at the time, or that she was under the opponent's illusion. This would confuse Red's judgment and make her report vague. At this time, Red also became serious and said, "We encountered a member of Amatsukami. Orochimaru fought with him." As she said this, Red described in detail how Orochimaru and Hashirama came out of the psychic link. She also mentioned the wood release ninjutsu that Hashirama used. Seeing that Red didn't mention much about the wind chime, Hyojin was a little surprised, so he asked tentatively, "Was there anything special about the member of Amatsukami who fought with Orochimaru?" Red avoided Hyojin's gaze, lowered her head, and said, "I was poisoned at the time, so I couldn't see too clearly. I only saw that the mask on his face had the pattern of Gale." "What the hell, she clearly saw my clone's face," Hyojin muttered in his heart, and then asked again, "What kind of ninjutsu did he use?" Red still answered in a low voice, "Just like what the village described in the information of Amatsukami, he used the magnetic release blood boundary." Hyojin, who had already misled Red, frowned. For a moment, he couldn't figure out what was wrong with Red. He asked again, "Only magnetic release?" Red nodded. Then, she said to herself in her heart, "I'm not doing this for that big bastard, Wind Chime. I just don't want the Hyuga clan to have a conflict with the village and affect the stability of the village." Well, that's it. Chapter 459. As if she had convinced herself, Red looked up at Hyojin and asked, "Captain, do you have any other questions? If not, I want to go back and rest first." Hyojin nodded and said, "You go back and rest first." Without saying anything more, Red got up and left. Looking at Red's back, Hyojin rubbed his chin and said to himself, "Something is wrong." At this time, Gale and Shien, who had been guarding outside the door, came in. After looking through Red's report, Shien frowned and said, "Captain, I always feel that there is something wrong with Senior Red." Gale said, "It's normal for her to be a little depressed after being plotted against by a strong enemy." Shien shook her head and said, "It's not a matter of being depressed. Senior Red has a strong character. She should be a little angry after being defeated like this, but Senior Red seems to have something on her mind." Gale curled his lips and said, "Shien, you think too much. The opponent is Orochimaru, one of the Sannin. It's useless to be angry after being plotted against by such a strong man." Hyojin ignored the bickering between Shien and Gale, and looked at Red's report thoughtfully. According to Kurenai's report, Orochimaru kidnapped her from Konoha village this time for the purpose of asking her to do something for him, and inferring from the fact that Orochimaru's destination is the Uchiha ruins, what Orochimaru wants her to do is most likely related to the Sword of the Ten Fists. If he needs Red's help, it must be related to illusions. This is indeed Orochimaru's weakness. Just as Hyojin was thinking, there was a sudden rush of footsteps in the corridor outside. Soon after, a large group of people pushed the door open and walked in. The person in the lead was none other than Asuma, who had been busy searching for Red for the past few days. Behind him were Kakashi, Kai, Anko, and a few others. As soon as they entered the room, Asuma asked, "Where is Red?" Hyojin replied, "She went back to rest." Asuma asked nervously, "Is she okay?" Kakashi, Guy, and Red Bean all looked at Hyojin, waiting for his answer. In order to avoid creating panic, the three generations did not agree to Asuma's request to search for Red. Therefore, Asuma had no choice but to ask Kakashi, Kai, Red Bean, and other students to help him find Red. Therefore, in the past few days, Kakashi and the others had put in a lot of effort to find Red. Hyojin patted Asuma's shoulder and said with a smile, "Don't worry, it's just a minor injury, nothing serious." After a long sigh of relief, Asuma asked, "By the way, which bastard attacked Red?" Hyojin threw Red's report to Asuma. Originally, the attack on Kuroto should have been kept confidential before the Sandaime-sama decided on it, but everyone present was his peer, and Kuroto also knew the ins and outs of the matter, so he knew that there was no value in keeping it a secret, so he didn't hide it from everyone. After reading the report one by one, Asma and others looked at each other. Asma asked in surprise, Orochimaru? How could it be him? Why did he kidnap Red? Originally, he was going to catch the murderer and help Kurenai vent her anger, but he didn't expect that the murderer was one of the Sannin, Orochimaru. He was surprised and helpless, because at present, even Sandaime wouldn't dare to say that he could defeat Orochimaru. As soon as she saw the name Orochimaru, Red Bean's face became gloomy. Even if she had walked out of the shadow of Orochimaru, Orochimaru was still the person she didn't want to face the most. Kakashi's attention was all on Amatsukami, and he said to himself, why did Amatsukami fight with Orochimaru? Is it related to Akatsuki? After taking back Red's report, Hyojin said, okay, this is the hospital, everyone can go back. Since there was no way to catch the murderer, Asma had to settle for the second best, and said, tomorrow, I will treat you to dinner to celebrate Red's safe return. Let's all come together. Guy laughed and said, speaking of which, it's been a long time since we got together. Kakashi, who had become a real one-eyed man, drooped his eyes and said weakly, I'll pass. Asma knew that Kakashi had a knot in his heart, so he deliberately put his arm around Kakashi's neck and said, hey, the trick you taught me is useless. Shouldn't you be responsible? Everyone can skip tomorrow, but you can't. Kakashi had no choice but to nod helplessly. Early the next morning, Hyojin took Red to the Naruto building, and after submitting Red's report to the three generations, Hyojin thought that the three generations would ask Red to stay and ask her alone, but he did not expect that the three generations only asked Red a few questions, and then let Hyojin and Red leave. Out of the Naruto building, Hyojin looked back in the direction of Naruto's office, and thought to himself, even the Umbu was attacked by Orochimaru. At the moment, the village was peaceful on the surface, but Hyojin knew very well that this was just the calm before the war. Through Yagura's secret channel, he learned that the 4 generations Kazekage of the Sand Crypsis and the 4 generations Lei-ing of the Cloud Village had secretly arrived in the village, and were currently arranged by the 3 generations to stay in the root base. Among the 5 Kage, only the 3 generations Tsuchikage of the Rock Village had not arrived yet. However, when the 3 generations met in the root base, they had already informed them that the 3 generations Tsuchikage Anoki agreed to participate in the secret meeting in Mai, and at this time, he was probably on the way. Thinking about the news from Yagura, Hyojin said, when the 5 Kage gather, I am afraid that the 3 generations will close the net. At this time, Red on the side wondered, Kuroto, don't you think that Naruto-sama is a bit strange today? It's about Orochimaru and Amatsukami, but Naruto-sama just casually asked a few questions. In order to deal with the inquiry of the 3 generations, Red painstakingly prepared at home yesterday, but she didn't expect that the 3 generations didn't want to investigate at all. Maybe the 3 generations have other things to do. After a perfunctory sentence, Hyojin glanced at Red and reminded her, tonight, Asma will treat everyone to dinner, don't be late. Red yawned. Oh, then I will go back to rest first, I didn't sleep well last night. After Red left, Hyojin thought, Red obviously knows a lot about my wind release clone, why didn't she report it? There must be a problem, did she find something? Evening. As promised, Suijin arrived at the izakaya where Asuma had booked a private room. Because it was still early, only Asma and Kakashi arrived first. When Hyojin pushed the door open, they were in the room talking about something. After entering the room, Hyojin smiled. What are you guys talking about? Asma said casually. Kakashi is teaching me how to chase after fame. Hyojin said with a face full of ridicule. He is single, how can he teach you? Asuma's face suddenly darkened, and he came to a sudden realization. That's right, no wonder the moves he taught me were useless. Kakashi put on a serious face, which was rare for him. What I taught Asuma was all from the books. Hyojin curled his lips contemptuously. What books? Kakashi quickly took out a small book with an orange-red cover from the ninja bag around his waist. On the cover of the book, the words "Intimate Paradise" were written in large, eye-catching characters. Chapter 460. Puff Hyojin, who had just taken a sip of sake, spurted it out when he saw the name of the book. Then he wiped his mouth and said in his heart, "What is this? A book written by an old bachelor is regarded as a treasure by a young bachelor, and then passed on to another young bachelor?" Others may not know, but Hyojin is very clear that the author of Intimate Paradise, Jiraiya, is a veritable old bachelor, a fool who has pursued Tsunade for most of his life but failed to succeed. Kakashi said weakly, "Why are you reacting so much?" Asuma grabbed Intimate Paradise from Kakashi's hand, and while flipping through it, he muttered, "I've heard of this book, it's said that the sales are very good." Kakashi smiled proudly, of course. Seeing Hyojin's disapproving face, Asuma closed the book and asked, "Kuroto, do you have any good ways to pursue a girl?" Hyojin said lightly, "Sorry, I don't know much about the problems of single people like you. In order to prevent the Kekii Genkai from leaking out, intermarriage within the family is a very common phenomenon in the Hyuga clan, Uchiha clan, and other powerful Kekii shinobi clans. Therefore, Kuroto had never worried about his wife's affairs since he was a child. The family would make a fortune." Asuma said with a black face, "I don't know why, but I suddenly want to beat you up." Kakashi also nodded in agreement with a sullen face. "Humph, weakling." Hyojin curled his lips and said, "Forget it, I'll give you some advice." While Hyojin was talking, Gale pushed the door and walked in, greeted the people in the private room, and then consciously sat on the side. In fact, Gale is 1 year younger than Hyojin and Kakashi, but because of the outbreak of the Third Shinobi World War, several batches of students graduated at the same time, so Gale and Hyojin can barely be regarded as the same batch of students. It was just that Gale was used to treating Hyojin and the others as his seniors. In their daily interactions, he considered himself as a junior. Hyojin asked Asuma, "By the way, what did Kakashi teach you today?" Asuma replied, "Kakashi asked me to invite Red to the hot spring today. I've even prepared the coupons. What do you think of this idea?" Cough cough. Coughing lightly, Kakashi emphasized, "This move is the ultimate move of Intimate Paradise. A hot spring, huh?" After pondering for a moment, Hyojin said, "Sounds pretty good." Asuma was overjoyed. "You think it's not bad too?" Listening to Asuma, Hyojin, and Kakashi's discussion, Gale did not know whether to laugh or cry. He raised his hand and asked weakly, "Asuma, senpai, have you confirmed your relationship with Red senpai?" Asuma scratched his head. "I haven't had the time to confess yet." Gale was speechless. "You haven't even confirmed your relationship? Then I suggest you don't invite Red senpai to the hot spring directly. That would be very rude." Asuma quickly asked, "Then what should I do?" Gale pondered for a moment and said slowly, "Red senpai is a little headstrong. If you want to pursue her, you have to at least be stronger than her, and the stronger the better. If you can be strong enough to make her worship you, then you'll have a 90% chance." "Is that so?" Asuma was deep in thought and mumbled, "But it's a little difficult." In terms of strength, Asuma's overall strength was obviously better than Red's. However, Red was good at illusions. If Asuma was slightly careless, he might be defeated by Red's illusions. Therefore, the victory or defeat between them would depend on the specific situation. Asuma might have a higher chance of winning, but he would not be able to crush Red, let alone be strong enough to make Red worship him. Gale said, "That's going to be difficult." Asuma's face was bitter. "You mean I don't have a chance?" Gale shrugged. "Senior, if you're willing to coax and pester and persist for a few years, there might be an effect. I haven't pursued a girl with a personality like Red, so I'm afraid I won't be of much help." Just as Asuma was secretly distressed, Red, Shien, Red Bean, and a few other girls came to the private room together, followed by Kai. Once there were more people, the private room suddenly became lively. In addition, everyone was almost in the same batch, so there was not much vigilance between them and they chatted very casually. After chatting for a while, Asma leaned in front of Red and asked, "Did the old man make things difficult for you today?" Red smiled and shook her head. "Naruto-sama just asked a few questions casually and let me go back to rest." Kakashi, who was at the side, frowned slightly when he heard this. Naruto-sama didn't ask in detail? This was related to Orochimaru and Amatsukami. Moreover, Orochimaru had even channeled the first and second generations during the battle. In Kakashi's opinion, the three generations should not take this matter lightly. Seeing that Red seemed unwilling to talk about this matter, Asma quickly changed the topic. "The old man has been a little strange recently." Woo! Suddenly, there was a sharp alarm outside the window. Everyone in the private room just looked out of the window, and there was no tension on their faces. Because the village announced yesterday that there would be an evacuation drill in the east of the village this evening. Shiyen whispered, "This is the third time, right? Why is the village's evacuation drill held so frequently recently?" Hyojin replied casually, "Maybe it's to prevent the revenge of Akatsuki." In fact, Hyojin could see that everyone present was more or less aware of something. After all, everyone was a jonin or a special jonin. They were already considered the elite class in the village. As long as they paid attention, they would always be able to notice something strange. However, the one who knew the most was probably Hyojin. Because only Hyojin knew that among the 5 Kage, 4 Kage have gathered in Mai, and the remaining 3 generations are also on the way. While everyone was a little distracted, Red quietly came to Hyojin's side and said, "Captain, let's have a drink." "Something's wrong." Hyojin raised his glass and secretly became vigilant. In private, Red would always call him by his name. She would never call him Captain. After drinking a glass, Red slightly lowered her voice and asked casually, "Captain, there shouldn't be many people in your Hyuga clan, right? Do you know all of them?" Hyojin looked at Red suspiciously and nodded. The Hyuga clan's Hyuga clan is composed of the Patriarch and the Elder. The reason for this arrangement is to avoid the Patriarch being beheaded by a strong enemy, which would lead to the instant collapse of the Hyuga clan. Therefore, the Elder is very low-key and often does not easily leave the Hyuga clan and expose themselves to the enemy. And the bloodline of the Elders is the same as the bloodline of the Patriarch. No matter how many children there are in each generation, only one person is eligible to be exempted from the curse of the caged bird, as a backup in case of an accident, so even if all the generations of the Hyuga family are added up, the number of people in the Hyuga family will not exceed 10. Red then asked, "Is there anyone with white hair in your Hyuga clan?" Chapter 461. The hair color of the Hyuga clan was mainly dark. Most of the clansmen had black hair, such as Hyojin and Kuroto. Some of them had dark blue, dark brown, and even dark green hair. However, there was no white hair. "Humph, do you want to investigate in private? Or have you already suspected me, that's why you didn't report to me?" After thinking to himself, Hyojin began to think. Then, he slowly replied, "There is no white hair in the Hyojin clan." "No?" Kuroto was startled. She thought that there were only a few people in the Hyuga clan, so it should be easy to find out the true identity of Wind Chime. She didn't expect that Hyojin would give her a negative answer. Hyojin's eyes narrowed. "Why do you ask?" Kuroto waved her hand. "No. Nothing, I'm just asking casually." Hyojin narrowed his eyes and thought to himself, "It seems that I have underestimated her. I didn't expect her to be so cunning. She actually wants to use my Type A wind release clone as a breakthrough to find clues about Amatsukami." Kuroto also turned her head to the side and thought to herself, "Wind Chime can resist the joint forces of Hashirama, and Orochimaru. He is the strongest ninja I have ever seen." How can Kuroto not know such a member of the same clan? Could it be that Wind Chime left the Hyuga clan a long time ago? Well, it must be like this. Immediately, Kuroto was in a dilemma again, but if this is the case, I can't find him. When can I return the favor I owe him? He was so badly injured to save me. I don't know if he is better now. Thinking of this, Kuroto's eyes subconsciously moved to Hyojin, and Hyojin also looked at Kuroto. The eyes of the two people intertwined with their own thoughts. It seems that I can only rely on Kuroto. They are of the same clan, so they should have some news about Wind Chime. Kuroto thought. You want to secretly investigate Amatsukami? Humph, you are still too young. Hyojin thought. The two of them, who were not on the same channel at all, gave each other a friendly smile. After the dinner, Asma mustered up his courage and invited Red to go to the hot spring together. However, Red, who had a lot on her mind, politely declined. Perhaps because Gale had advised him before, Asma, who was mentally prepared, did not feel too defeated. On the contrary, Kakashi was in a daze. He held the intimate paradise in his hands and muttered to himself, "How could this be? This is a sure-kill skill. Why did it fail?" For the next 2 days, Hyojin kept trying to contact Jishui and Itachi, but to no avail. Even the ninja crows can't send messages. Did something happen to them? Although Hyojin believed in Jishui and Itachi's strength, the fact that both of them had disappeared at the same time for several days made him think the worst. Who could have subdued Jishui and Itachi before they even had the chance to send a warning to the ninja crows? After thinking about it for a long time, Hyojin found that even Nagato and Obsidian would not be able to do this, so he said to himself, "Let's wait and see." Afterward, Hyojin changed into the Type A wind release clone and rushed to Danzo's new route base. Because of the last transaction, the route ninjas who were patrolling the periphery saw Hyojin dressed as Wind Chime of Amatsukami and politely led him into the base. Soon, Hyojin saw Danzo in the base, but to his surprise, there was another person standing next to Danzo. This person was none other than Orochimaru. Danzo immediately introduced. Orochimaru was specially invited by me to help me complete the Chimera Kekii Genkai fusion ritual. Despite the previous transaction, Danzo doesn't trust Amatsukami. At the same time, he also doesn't trust Orochimaru. Therefore, he hopes that Orochimaru and Amatsukami will restrict each other and work for him at the same time. After Danzo's introduction, Orochimaru nodded to Hyojin. There was a hint of vigilance in Kuroto's expression, but he didn't mention anything about the previous battle at the Uchiha ruins, as if he never fought with Suijin at all. Hyojin also tacitly didn't mention that battle. He returned a salute to Orochimaru and said to himself, "Tisk, he wouldn't have the same idea as me, right?" At this time, Danzo led the two to the base's laboratory. This underground laboratory is very large, and the equipment inside is very complete. Some of the equipment Hyojin hasn't even seen before, it seems to be newly developed equipment. In front of a petri dish, Danzo said, "My subordinates have analyzed the characteristics of this ghost sprout. The difficulty of controlling it is greater than this old man expected." Hyojin took out the data he carried with him and said, "This is the data our organization seized from Shino. I think it will be helpful to you." After receiving the data, Danzo looked at it briefly and immediately handed it over to Orochimaru, who was standing on the side. Orochimaru looked at it more seriously. He carefully looked for a long time before saying in his hoarse voice, "This data is very useful." Hyojin asked, "Tell me about your plan to restrict the ghost sprout." Hyojin didn't care about the bloodline fusion ritual, because Hirako had already completed it once. As long as he followed the steps, there was a very high probability of success. Therefore, what Hyojin really cared about was the plan to effectively restrict the ghost sprout. This was also the key reason why he chose to cooperate with Danzo. Clap clap, Danzo clapped his hands and soon, a researcher in a white coat came in front of them. The researcher pushed the glasses on the bridge of his nose and said, "Our plan is to inscribe a sealing technique on the ghost sprout and use it to control it." Hyojin secretly said, "It really is a sealing technique." Using a sealing technique to control the ghost sprout was the first method that Hyojin thought of. However, the nature of the ghost sprout was very special. It had almost no fixed state. Ordinary sealing techniques that were inscribed on it were likely to collapse and fail due to the distortion of its form. After pondering for a moment, Hyojin didn't hide anything and told them his concerns. Further improvement of the ghost sprout technique was the key to Hyojin's success. Therefore, although he regarded Danzo as a lab rat, at this moment, he was really wholeheartedly advising Danzo. At this time, Orochimaru, who was in deep thought, suddenly said, "As far as I know, among the Uzumaki clan's sealing techniques, there are also many sealing techniques that can change form, such as the diamond seal." There was no doubt that Orochimaru didn't hide anything in the matter of improving the ghost sprout technique. Chapter 462. Diamond Lock. Danzo silently muttered, and immediately ordered the subordinate beside him, "Bring me the secret scroll of Diamond Lock." "Yes." The root ninja responded and hurriedly left. After a while, the root ninja returned to the laboratory and handed Danzo a scroll that looked old and the cover was already yellowed. At this time, Hyojin and Orochimaru's eyes converged on the scroll at the same time. Danzo slowly opened the scroll and said, "This was left behind by that Sama." The Sama mentioned by Danzo is undoubtedly the wife of Hashirama, the first 9 tales of Mai's Jinchuriki Uzumaki Mito. Uzumaki Mito was famous in the shinobi world for her powerful sealing techniques and perception ability. At that time, she was one of the strongest ninjas in the shinobi world, but because the strength of Hashirama was too heaven-defying, he almost suppressed the entire shinobi world by himself, causing other strong ninjas to be overshadowed in front of Hashirama. Orochimaru smiled and said, "I didn't expect that the secret scroll of Diamond Lock would be in your hands. No wonder I couldn't find it when I sneaked into the ninjutsu archives." Danzo coldly glanced at Orochimaru, and immediately opened the scroll in front of Hyojin and Orochimaru. Diamond Seal is one of the strongest sealing techniques of the Maelstrom clan, and it is also the technique that the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki likes to use the most, because it can easily subdue the strongest of the tailed beasts, the Kyuubi. In the original space and time, the second 9 tails of Mai's Jinchuriki Uzumaki Kushina used this technique when the 9 tails were forcibly pulled out of her body by obsidian, and when she was about to die, she used this technique and successfully restrained the 9 tails. At that time, she had just given birth, and her body was still weak. Then, she suffered a serious injury when her 9 tails were taken away. She was basically on the verge of death. Even so, the diamond seal she cast still effectively controlled the strongest of the tailed beasts, the 9 tails. This showed how powerful the sealing technique of the Whirlpool clan was. So when the secret scroll of King Kong's seal was opened, Kuroto couldn't care less and directly read it with full concentration. After a long time, he retracted his gaze and said, "No wonder only the Uzumaki clan can use this technique. It turns out that only the Uzumaki clan can practice it." The corner of Orochimaru's mouth also twitched and said, "What a pity! The Uzumaki clan has long been scattered, and the only one in the village who has the Uzumaki bloodline is the current 9 tails' Jinchuriki Uzumaki Naruto, but Naruto is only a 7-year-old child, and obviously can't help Danzo." This is not the first time Danzo flipped through the secret scroll of Diamond Lock, and he naturally knew the requirements of the technique, so he said in a low voice, "This old man can try to practice it." Hyojin glanced at Danzo, and chose to stay silent. Orochimaru had a playful look on his face. Both of them knew very well what Danzo meant. Because Danzo has the Hashirama cells implanted in him, he can be considered to have the Thousand Hand Clan's bloodline, and the Thousand Hand Clan and the Uzumaki clan are relatives, so in theory, the Thousand Hand Clan has a chance to successfully practice the sealing technique that requires the Uzumaki clan's bloodline. Of course, this is only in theory. The reaction of Hyojin and Orochimaru showed that they are not optimistic about Danzo. Because Danzo wasn't as talented as Yondaime-sama, even if he was qualified to practice Diamond Lock, it would be difficult for him to succeed with his innate talent. Seeing Hyojin not saying anything, and Orochimaru has a playful look on his face, Danzo's face is a little embarrassed, and he said angrily, "Apart from this, do you have any other way?" Hyojin and Orochimaru looked at each other, and said in unison, "Let's try other sealing techniques." Surprised by Hyojin and Orochimaru's tacit understanding, Danzo looked at them suspiciously for a long time, then sighed and said, "Come with me." The two followed Danzo through a secret passage, and then came to a large breeding room. As soon as they stepped into the breeding room, Hyojin's expression changed. The breeding room was extremely large. There were more than a dozen rows of breeding troughs arranged vertically and horizontally. There were at least 30 researchers working in the room. Not only that, the equipment in the breeding room is a model that Hyojin has never seen before, and it seems that it is all confidential equipment that is forbidden from the public market. If not for the mask on his face, Hyojin might not be able to control the surprise on his face. Not only him, but Orochimaru's face also showed a little unnatural expression. It was a mixture of envy, jealousy, and disdain. At this time, Danzo led Hyojin and Orochimaru in front of a breeding tank. Pointing at the breeding tank in front of him, Danzo said, "To tell you the truth, this old man has tried more than 20 sealing techniques, and the results are not very satisfactory." Looking at the breeding tank in front of him, Hyojin shouted in his heart, "Can money really do whatever you want?" In front of him was a long row of incubation tanks. Hundreds of living ghost sprouts were being cultivated, and many of these ghost sprouts had been engraved with sealing techniques. Obviously, Danzo had conducted a lot of experiments in private. It should be noted that cultivating a living ghost sprout is not much cheaper than cultivating a clone for Hyojin. Not to mention the technical problems, and not to mention the consumption of equipment, the medicinal ingredients alone would cost a huge sum, and cultivating hundreds of ghost sprout at one time would cost an astronomical figure. Unlike the ones Hyojin seized from Shino, these living ghost sprout that Danzo cultivated were all grown by him. "That's inhumane," Hyojin secretly sighed. At the same time, he was glad that he chose Danzo as the lab rat. Looking at the whole ninja world, there are only a few who have the courage to implant Ghost Sprout and have the financial resources to develop and research Ghost Sprout, and Danzo is undoubtedly the easiest one for Hyojin to get in touch with, and now it seems that this choice is undoubtedly correct. Orochimaru was also surprised. Obviously, he did not expect Danzo to take action so quickly. It has only been a few days since he got the living Ghost Sprout, and he has already cultivated so many living Ghost Sprout, regardless of the cost, and even started the sealing technique experiment. Glancing at Danzo without a trace, Orochimaru secretly sneered. "Can't wait anymore." Orochimaru looked at Danzo with eyes full of sympathy. His eyes did not look like he was looking at a powerful elder Mai, but like he was looking at a pitiful person who fell into paranoia and madness. Chapter 463. Soon, Hyojin calmed his mind and observed the results of Danzo's experiment. The ghost sprout's characteristic of fusing with flesh and blood allowed it to change its appearance at will. Therefore, the sealing technique based on the sealing technique could not effectively restrict it for a long period of time. This was because if the sealing technique was not removed, the ghost sprout would not be able to fuse with flesh and blood. However, if the sealing technique was removed, The sealing technique engraved on the ghost sprout would inevitably be damaged due to the ghost sprout's expansion and deformation. Once the damage reached a certain degree, the sealing technique engraved on the ghost sprout would naturally be ineffective. The ghost sprout test subjects that were engraved with the sealing technique in the breeding tank all had this situation without exception. The sealing technique engraved on them had big and small defects due to the distortion of their form. 4 symbols seal, 5 elements seal, evil sealing seal, 8 trigrams seal. After observing one by one, Hyojin recognized many of the sealing techniques that he was familiar with. There were also many that he had never seen before. Judging from his experience, if there were no accidents, the sealing technique engraved on the ghost sprout test subjects would all be ineffective in a week at most. Hyojin secretly sighed. It seems that ordinary sealing technique really can't restrict the ghost sprout. The sealing technique, like the 4 symbols seal, was already an extremely high-end sealing technique in the ninja world. Even so, it still couldn't restrict the ghost sprout for a long period of time. In other words, all the sealing techniques based on engraved sealing technique would not be able to satisfy the requirements of restricting the ghost sprout. It must be like King Kong seal, Ghoul seal, 9 seals of Phantom Dragon, which were based on the spirit body and the power of chakra, to satisfy the requirements of restricting the ghost sprout. But in this case, it couldn't be done by others. Only by practicing this type of sealing technique could one constantly restrict the ghost sprout in one's body and ensure that the ghost sprout would not get out of control. At this time, Danzo said, "As you can see, the effect of ordinary sealing techniques is very poor. It is unable to restrict the ghost sprout for a long time." Orochimaru smiled and said, "Maybe we can try to improve the Vortex Clan's King Kong seal." Hyojin gently nodded. "Anyway, the target is only the ghost sprout that can devour flesh and blood, not the huge tail beast of chakra. Even if I have to sacrifice some sealing power, it doesn't matter." It was indeed very difficult to improve a top-notch sealing technique while maintaining the sealing power. It required a lot of calculations and experiments, and even some luck. However, if he was allowed to sacrifice a portion of the seal's power, it would be much easier to improve it. Orochimaru turned around in front of the breeding tank and said, "The main material of the ghost sprout is also problematic. The gel chosen by Hirako is too unstable. Maybe we can try to use other more stable materials to improve the stability of the ghost sprout." Hyojin came to another breeding tank, and while observing the living ghost sprout inside the breeding tank, he suggested, "In fact, there is also room for improvement during the breeding process. We can try to fuse the ghost sprout with our own flesh and blood at the beginning of the breeding process. Although this will increase the cost of cultivating the ghost sprout, it can also increase the degree of taming the ghost sprout." Hirako's current process was to first cultivate the ghost sprout, and then let the ghost sprout fuse with his own cells. Putting the cell fusion process at the end of the breeding process may ensure the success rate of the ghost sprout, but because the ghost sprout grows independently, even if the ghost sprout successfully fuses with his own cells, the ghost sprout will still be difficult to tame. According to Hyojin's idea, moving the cell fusion process forward will greatly reduce the success rate of the ghost sprout, but as long as a ghost sprout is successfully cultivated, the ghost sprout that has fused with the host cells at the beginning of its growth will have a higher degree of taming compared to the ghost sprout that grows independently. Listening to Hyojin and Orochimaru's suggestions, Danzo, who originally thought that the experiment had reached a dead end, suddenly felt a sense of enlightenment. He looked at Hyojin and Orochimaru, who were still discussing how to improve the ghost sprout, and thought to himself, letting them participate in the experiment is really the right choice. Danzo actually doesn't know that these ideas of improving the ghost sprout were not something that Hyojin and Orochimaru came up with on the spur of the moment, but they already had the idea in their mind. It's just that the lack of financial resources made it difficult to put it into practice. For example, the choice of the ghost sprout. Hirako is not a fool, since he chose this ghost sprout. He obviously has his own considerations. Perhaps there are indeed better ghost sprout materials in the shinobi world, but the amount of manpower and material resources required to find better ghost sprout is simply immeasurable, and it's even possible to invest a lot of money only to lose everything. As for the improvement of the process, it will directly affect the success rate of the ghost sprout. It must be known that probability is a very magical thing. Once it is reduced to a certain level, the cost of the experiment will increase by 10 times, 100 times, or even 1,000 times, or even 10,000 times. In fact, these suggestions belong to the category of don't try or don't try. So Orochimaru and Kuroda just want to use Shimura Danzo's financial resources to try out the ideas that they couldn't implement before. Outside the Mai village. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. With the sound of breaking wind, several figures landed in the forest. These figures are all dressed in my umbu attire. If Hyojin was here, he would definitely be able to recognize the leader. It is the Shadow Guard captain of the 3 generations Naruto. After looking around, the Shadow Guard captain shouted towards the empty forest, "Tsushikage-sama, we were ordered to pick you up." At this time, a stream of light flashed in the forest. Many figures emerged from the invisible state, and in the blink of an eye, more than a dozen figures appeared in the seemingly empty forest, and the leader was the 3 generations Inoki, and behind him were 3 squads of elite rock ninjas. The Shadow Guard captain stepped forward and said, "Tsushikage-sama, please follow me into the village." Inoki nodded and asked, "Is everyone else here?" The Shadow Guard captain replied, "Yes, the Kazekage, Lei-ing, and Mizukage-sama have all arrived smoothly." Inoki clasped his hands behind his back and said with a depressed expression, "I didn't expect us 5 shadows to be so sneaky. Alas, it's really embarrassing." Soon, under the leadership of the Shadow Guard captain, the Tsuchikage and his party bypassed the Mai patrol team, and just like the Kazekage, Lei-ing, and Mizukage-sama, they quietly entered Mai. Chapter 464. A Mai patrol team is patrolling the periphery of the village. Caw-caw, accompanied by the cawing of crows, several crows with glossy feathers suddenly flew past the forest. Looking at the crows gradually disappearing into the horizon, one of the Mai ninjas in the patrol team muttered, "Hey, don't you feel that there are a lot of crows in the vicinity these days?" Another Konoha ninja in the team echoed, "Listening to what you said, it seems to be true." In fact, this patrol team is not the only one who noticed this, but because Mai is surrounded by forests with many birds and beasts, although many people noticed it, they didn't pay too much attention to it. As for these crows, there is no doubt that they are the ninja crows spread by Hyojin. Unable to contact Jishuei and Itachi for a long time made Hyojin very uneasy, but since there are no clues, he can only spread out all the ninja crows and carry out a carpet search. In addition to arranging the ninja crows to search for Jishuei and Itachi, Hyojin has been paying attention to the secret Gakage assembly while working with Orochimaru to improve the Chimera technique. Kuroda has to admit that Orochimaru has an unparalleled talent in the development of forbidden techniques, and with the Tenseigan, Kuroda's research on the Chimera technique is not inferior to that of its creator, Hirako. With the two of them working together, coupled with Danzo's ample manpower and strong financial resources, many of the problems that had been placed in front of them before were easily solved. The speed of improvement is so fast that even Hyojin is a little surprised. On this day, Hyojin, who is controlling the Type A wind release clone, is testing the performance of the new gelatinous material in Danzo's root base. Danzo once again showed his financial resources and his power in Mai. In just 2 days, the root base, which has been abolished for 3 generations, has collected more than 70 new gelatinous materials in the shinobi world, some of which, not to mention Hyojin, even Orochimaru hasn't seen them before. However, testing the performance of the new gelatinous material is like a lottery. If he is lucky and finds an excellent gelatinous material, then many problems that have been troubling Hyojin may be solved in an instant, but if he is unlucky, he may waste time and effort and get nothing. After ruling out the 9th gelatinous material, Hyojin shook his head and thought, Hirako should have done a performance test before choosing the gelatinous material. If we can find his test data, our workload should be reduced a lot. Thinking of this, Hyojin glanced at Orochimaru not far away. Just like him, Orochimaru is also testing the performance of the new gelatinous material. Unlike his usual sinister and cunning self, Orochimaru is completely focused on the experiment. His face is meticulous, without any unnecessary expression. In Hyojin's memory, staying in the same laboratory with Orochimaru like this is something that happened a long time ago. Withdrawing his gaze, Hyojin frowned. He doesn't know why, but he always feels that something is wrong today, as if something bad is going to happen. Regarding this, Kuroto didn't take it lightly, because in the shinobi world, as long as a spirit body reaches a certain level of strength, it will more or less have some magical abilities, such as the death prophecy ability of the Miko-sama. Will the Akatsuki attack happen today? My village. Today, the streets are crowded with people, especially lively, because today is the day when the new batch of students enter the ninja school, so the parents are rushing to the ninja school with their children. Among the crowd, Richa, dressed in regular clothes, and Ningxi are also strolling in the direction of the ninja school. Coming to the gate of the ninja school, Niji did not laugh and play like other children, but looked around with a serious face to observe the students who entered the school with him. Ningji's scrutinizing gaze swept across his fellow students before he gently shook his head. Richa, who has been secretly paying attention to Ningxi, asked, "What's wrong?" Ningxi replied with some disappointment, "Father, there doesn't seem to be any strong opponent in this batch." Hizashi-sama smiled. In this generation, Ningxi is the well-deserved #1 genius in the Hyuga clan, so there are only a few people in the entire village who can be regarded as strong opponents by him. The entrance ceremony lasted for a long time, until the evening the ceremony ended. Walking out of the ninja school, Richa saw that Ningxi is not in a good mood, as if he has something on his mind, so he asked, "What are you thinking about?" Hesitating for a moment, Ningxi looked at Richa and said, "Father, didn't you say that Naruto-sama will personally host every new batch of students? Why didn't Naruto-sama appear today? Is it because our batch is not worthy of attention?" Looking at Ningxi, who is calm on the surface, but extremely sensitive inside, Richa touched his head and said, "Silly child, didn't Tsunade-sama attend the entrance ceremony? Naruto-sama must have something else to do, so he can't leave. It has nothing to do with whether your batch is worthy of attention or not." Ningxi lowered his head and whispered, "Is that so?" Ever since he saw with his own eyes that his uncle, who is a member of the ancestral family, used the caged bird curse to punish his father, Richa, Ningxi has become exceptionally sensitive. Even if his family members are pointing at him from afar, he will still be particularly concerned. At this time, Ningxi's gaze moved to a big tree in the distance. There were 2 swings hanging down from the tree, and a yellow-haired child and a black-haired child were swinging while looking at the entrance ceremony of the ninja school. Ningxi's gaze quickly locked on the black-haired child, and he said in a deep voice, "Uchiha Sasuke." Richa also cast his gaze over and said casually, "That Uchiha child is 1 year younger than you, and he should only be enrolled next year." Ningxi said with a serious face, "Father, he is my strong opponent. It's a pity that we are not in the same batch, otherwise I can compete with him." Under the tree in the distance, Naruto, who was swinging with Sasuke, pointed at Ningxi, who was staring at them, and said, "Sasuke, look, that white-eyed guy has been staring at you." Sasuke snorted softly, "Are you an idiot? It's so obvious that he's spying." As Uchiha, how could I not notice it? Naruto was a little puzzled. Why does he keep staring at you? Sasuke smiled proudly and said lightly. He should have noticed that I'm the only one who is truly strong among these people. Woo! Suddenly, a sound that sounded like both a roar and a wail came from the distance. The sound was layered and seemed to distort space. It sounded far away at times, and at other times close to the ears. It made one's hair stand on end and felt extremely uncomfortable. Naruto stopped the swinging swing and looked at Sasuke. Did you hear that? Sasuke nodded with a straight face and looked into the distance. His originally black eyes suddenly turned scarlet. Chapter 465. The strange sound continued to spread over my village. Almost at the same time, Richa and Ningtse opened their Byakugan and looked in the direction of the sound. However, the source of the sound was very far away from them, beyond the range of their Byakugan observation. Withdrawing his gaze, Richa ordered, "Let's go back to the clan land first." Ningtse said, "Father, I don't know why, but I always feel that this sound is full of evil." Richa nodded with a solemn expression. He also felt an evil filled with all kinds of desires and madness from the sound. When passing by Sasuke and Naruto, Richa stopped and urged loudly, "Don't wander on the street, hurry up and go home." On another street, little Zyuen was holding a string of meatballs and chewing them in big mouthfuls. Azuma followed behind Zyuen with a helpless expression, holding a lot of snacks and toys that Zyuen had just bought. This had become his daily routine. At this moment, a sound came. As if struck by lightning, Zyuen froze on the spot. Azuma quickly asked, "Your Highness, what's wrong?" Zyuen seemed to be stunned and said with a sobbing tone, I saw a lot of death prophecies." Azuma was also stunned for a moment, a little at a loss. Jingle jingle jingle. At this time, the village's evacuation alarm rang one after another. Azuma, who had been instructed by Hyojin, did not dare to hesitate. She threw all the junk in her hands to the ground, took Zyuen's little hand, and ran to the nearest shelter. On a cliff far away from my village, an elite jonin of the grass ninja village named Wu was walking step by step towards a huge square box carved with twisted ghost faces on all sides. If Hyojin was here, he would be able to recognize at a glance that this huge box exuding evil chakra is the secret weapon of the grass ninja village, the Box of Bliss. Behind Wu there are 4 people. They are the 4 elders who are in charge of the grass ninja village. Our long-cherished wish is finally going to be realized. The revival of the grass ninjas is today, right now. Wu, don't hesitate. Quickly say the prayer for the revival of the grass ninjas. Yes, your son's sacrifice was not in vain. He should also be looking forward to this day. The 4 elders wearing goat, cow, dog, and monkey masks were extremely excited and crazy at this time, as if the world will fall into their hands in the next moment. Even further away, Shinichi threw the unconscious Jinchuriki of Nibi to Hirako, who was standing on top of the Sumeru beast. Shinichi's chakra was completely drained by the Box of Bliss. Immediately, he glanced at the grass ninjas in the distance and said with disdain, "Do you think this bunch of trash is qualified to rule the shinobi world?" Hirako, who was fused with the shaman beast, took the unconscious Yujito Nibi, then moved his eyes to the Box of Bliss with a look of interest. Unlike Uchiha and Shinichi, Hirako's degree of acceptance of new things is much higher. Moreover, he has already tried before. No matter what method he used, he was unable to damage the Box of Bliss. This alone is enough to arouse his interest. Raising the corner of his mouth, Hirako asked casually, "What do you think is hidden in the box?" Shinichi said, "No matter what is hidden in the box, it is impossible to destroy Our Akatsuki opened the Box of Bliss for the grass ninjas, and they destroyed for us. This is just a deal. No one really believes that a trivial grass ninja can destroy my village, the head of the 5 great shinobi villages. With a smile, Hirako continued, "Let's go, our mission here is complete." Shinichi didn't say anything after hearing this and jumped onto the back of the shaman beast. At this time, the shaman beast also flapped its wings and carried Hirako, Shinichi, and the unconscious Yujito Nibi towards the distance. The grass ninjas are only the first wave of attack prepared by the Akatsuki for my village. They still have other tasks to accomplish. In front of the box of bliss, Udo looked at the distorted face on the box and fell into a brief memory. As a staunch member of the grass ninja village, Udo's lifelong wish was to open the box of bliss and revive the grass ninja village. But it wasn't until he sacrificed his son, Udo, that he suddenly realized that what he really cared about was not the revival of the grass ninja village, but his son. At this time, the scenes of the past with his son flashed in his mind, and the anxious urging of the grass ninja village elders were all thrown to the back of his mind. "Open it, box of bliss!" All of a sudden, Wu Wei shouted loudly. In an instant, a series of sounds came from the box of bliss, which was a roar that directly hit the soul, a whisper that aroused desire, and a whine full of pain. At this time, 2 lines of tears flowed down Udo's cheeks, and in the midst of the magical whistling sound of the box of bliss and the expectation of the 4 grass ninja village elders behind him, he said word by word, "Please be sure to return my son Udo to me, box of bliss, fulfill my wish." "Udo, you? What? Traitor! How dare you betray the village?" The 4 grass ninja village elders were terrified. They didn't expect that there would be a problem at the last stage, and the one who betrayed them was Udo, who was willing to sacrifice his son not long ago. Woo! Another mournful wail came from the box of bliss. Immediately after that, the relief on the face facing Wu Wei started to peel off. Under the strange light, the twisted face was revealed one after another. Finally, the face of a beast appeared in everyone's vision. It opened its mouth wide, revealing the darkness and profoundness hidden in the box. It was as if the inside of the box of bliss was connected to another space and time. At this time, whether it was Wu Wei or the 4 elders of the Kusanagi village behind him, all of them were stunned. This was because they felt a strong malice from the box of bliss, so strong that it almost condensed into a substance. Suddenly, a figure swayed out of the dark and deep box. "My village, Naruto's office." The representative of the conservative faction of the Grass Ninja Village, the elite Jonin Ryurin, bowed to 3 generations and said, "I'm sorry, Udo couldn't delay it to the day after tomorrow as agreed. What's going to come will come." After waving his hand, 3 generations asked, "About the box of bliss, did you really lose all the information about it?" Ryurin said, "I promise you, the Grass Ninja faction did not hide anything from you." 3 generations took a deep breath of his pipe and sighed. "In other words, even you don't know what's in the box?" Long Lon nodded and then said in a deep voice, "In order to open it, we Kusanagi have sacrificed too much in the past few decades. I can feel that it is a truly ominous thing, so please treat it carefully." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.